Well, 4 days after the finish of a great Tour de Flanders, here we are now in the town of Deinze, which is really the start town now for the 69th edition of the race from Gent to Wevelgem. A little bit different, but basically, Paul, we're in the same terrain. We've got the Kemmelberg this time.
Yeah, very difficult. The riders go on 2 circuits down towards the end of the Kemmelberg, and that's really where the action is likely to happen. And once again, rather strangely enough, there's hardly any wind at all in Belgium, and that is normally the riders' greatest worry in a race like this.
Well, we've hit a great spell of weather right now, and the riders are back. Tom Bonen nursing his wound to the Tour of Flanders. Is he here to win or to train for next Sunday's Paris-Roubaix? The first 2 finishes in the Tour of Flanders have decided to miss out on this. Robbie McEwen is here. It's a race he could do well in, and it is indeed a very good field. Let's go to the action.
Gent Wevelgem is always a strange race, isn't it? Because some of the big riders don't really want to race too hard because they're thinking about recovering from Flanders, and then they're thinking about getting ready for the Tour of Paris-Roubaix.
Yeah, but anyway, it's a Pro Tour race, and so a lot of riders in the team, Belgium teams are under pressure here, especially Quick Step. They didn't get anything in Flanders, so I think that's a part to beat, team to beat.
Okay, good luck today. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
It's a kind of race that you could do well in if Robbie falls by the wayside.
Well, Robbie's feeling pretty confident today. We have a strong team. You know, the morale's really high after Flanders. I'm feeling much better. I've been sick for the last couple of weeks, and I'm finally feeling better. So main goal is to help Robbie, and but you never know. I mean, this race is Gent Wevelgem. It's one of the biggest races of the year, and anything can happen.
Big race for the sprinters. In the past, it's seen winners like Mario Cipollini. Robbie McEwen would like to add his name right up there, wouldn't he?
Yeah, you know, it's always been a top sprinter that could win this. A guy that's strong. You know, sprinter has had a great year. Like when Cipollini won it, he just came off winning Milan-San Remo. So it's something that Robbie probably wants to add to his palmarès. Thanks.
Tom, a little bit of a difficult start to the year for you with that nasty crash in the Tour of Qatar.
Yeah, it's been a little disaster. First race of the year, and I broke immediately my collarbone. So it's been a start with ups and downs.
I was amazed to see you actually getting in the places already in the 3 days of La Panne. So things must be starting to get back for you.
Yeah, it's getting better and better. I like a lot of riders do after my collarbone. I restarted too fast, too hard, and I had 2-3 weeks really off. But now, since the 3 days of the bonnet, it starts to get better and better. So let's hope we can do something today.
Okay, today really, is it for you or is it mainly for Robbie McEwen?
Oh, I think it's for Robbie. Yeah. He's the fastest of the moment of the whole pack. Now it's up to us to hopefully get him in the right position to win the race.
Okay, good luck.
Thanks.
Robbie. Good to see you back in Belgium.
Don't do that many races here, actually. I live here, but I don't race here that much.
Yeah, that's a bit strange, isn't it? You actually live right in the middle of all these Belgian races and you don't get a chance to ride many of them.
No, I don't ride a lot of them. That's mostly through my own choice. I mean, I ride things like Het Volk, but Tour of Flanders is not really my thing. And, you know, I've got the Tour of Italy coming up, and then later on the Tour de France, so that'll be spreading myself a bit thin.
This is a race that I think you would really like to win. This is a race that is right up your street as a sprinter, but the problem is you've got to get over the Kemmelberg a couple of times.
Yeah, I mean, the Kemmel's the only hill in the race, but it can be a breaking point. But it often also depends on the wind, and today there's hardly any wind. The weather's quite nice. I expect it to be a pretty big group at the finish, and you know, then it's a chance for me to have a go at Gent Wevelgem.
Talking to a few of your teammates just before the start, they said that they are very motivated after a good Tour of Flanders, and they reckon it's for you today.
Yeah, the boys are all riding really well, so I know I'm going to be well supported, and I've got the confidence that those guys will be able to protect me all the way to the finish, and then it'll be the legs that do the talking, and you know, get up there in the sprint and see if I can pull one off. Thanks.
Good to see you. Well, the last time we saw you was the Amgen Tour of California. You're now over in the heart of Europe now. Things are a bit different.
Definitely a bit different. It's a good change. I actually just came from Mallorca, the World Track Champs, where I had a big smash in the scratch race. So, you know, I raced 2 days ago. It was my first race back, and now I'm at the big show.
This is the kind of race that could suit a man like you if you can get over the Kemmelberg and be in the group towards the end.
Absolutely. It just all depends how the race pans out. You know, the biggest bunch that's come to the line has been 50, so if I can make that, then who knows?
Fitting into the team nicely?
Yeah, I'm loving it actually. Good group of guys, and no, it's good fun. Thanks.
Well, Brownie, pretty good start to the year for you, but this is certainly the kind of race that really normally falls to a sprinter like yourself.
Yeah, I've had a pretty good start. I'm happy with it. I'm a little bit fed up with coming second, I guess, but yeah, today's a good day and it's no wind, so it should be a very different race for Gent Wevelgem. So yeah, maybe it will be a big bunch sprint.
If it came down to a bunch sprint down towards the end, would you be allowed to ride for yourself, or would you have to look after Oscar Freire?
Well, it depends on how Oscar feels. Obviously, he's one of the quickest guys in the world, and he proved that in Milan-San Remo. So if it come down to a sprint with both Oscar and I in the sprint, I'd probably have to help Oscar, but that's not a problem. He most probably will win.
All right, well, good luck today. It's going to be a good race because there's not too much wind around.
Yeah, thanks.
Go, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Good. Yourself?
Not bad. Well, last year you won this race. You got through the Tour of Flanders without too many injuries. Do you want to win it again?
Yeah, I want, but I don't know if I can make it. My form is, I don't know my form, how it is at the moment, so now we just see.
It shouldn't be too difficult to race when it goes up to the coast this year because there's not really very much wind around, so most people are thinking it could well be a big bunch sprint today.
Yeah, it can be a sprint. Yeah, it's true, it's not too much wind, but anyway, it's going to go first up Kemmerberg and maybe 50 guys, but I can't believe more than that.
Who do you think is a person to keep an eye on?
Oh, it's many, I think, but I think I don't CSC, it's a good man.
He's making a name for himself already.
Yeah.
Good luck. Gent Wevelgem is an important race for everybody in the main peloton, but like yourself, this is a kind of race today where it could be a strange result because there are so many stars and a lot of guys trying to save themselves maybe.
Yeah, I noticed on the team rosters there's a lot of sprinters here, so I think most of the teams are going to really try and control things along the coast and coming away, but it depends on how windy it is too and who feels frisky there on the camel.
Well, the camel is really what it's all about. It's important to get a good position, especially that left-hand turn at the bottom.
Yeah, it's amazing how chaotic it gets leading into that, and then you make that left and you're leaning one guy on the left, one guy on the right and bumping bars, but that's where the selection's made, so you have to have good position.
We'll try and keep upright.
Yeah, I will, thanks.
That's a nicer shirt.
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking the national champions jersey. Is it quite comfortable wearing that jersey now?
Yeah, it's nice. You know, you feel a little bit distinguished from the rest of the team, and you know, when you come from a place that's as far away as New Zealand, it's certainly something special to have it on this side of the world.
We've seen you racing an awful lot already this year. How's the form, and are you a possible contender for Gent Wevelgem?
I think I had a sinus infection last week, so I've been. I mean, I was going good in Tirreno Adriatico and Milan-San Remo, and you know, I've been struggling a little bit since then. But I'm starting to feel a little bit better now. So maybe today we'll have the chance of doing something.
Been following the cricket at all?
No, don't get too much of it here in Belgium, but I know they were going well when I was at home in Spain there. So hopefully they're still soldiering on.
All right, see you later. Good luck.
Okay, thanks.
Matty, how are you doing today?
Yeah, we'll find out pretty quick if we've recovered from Sunday or not. But no, it's good, perfect weather today, and a lot more sprinters here than normal at Gent Wevelgem this year.
I noticed that myself. You think people are, a lot of the sprinters are actually missing out on the Tour of Flanders because they want to concentrate on Gent Wevelgem?
Yeah, I think there's a certain type of sprinter. Yeah, Haydo, Graham Brown, those are the guys who, you know, Tour of Flanders is too hard for them, and they've chosen other races in the last week to prepare for today.
Are you surprised with JJ Haydo already in Europe getting himself his first win?
No, not at all. Anyone who's raced in America, Tour of California, Tour of Georgia, those races, they're not easy races. Yeah, the sprinting, look who he beat last year in Tour of Georgia, California, Olaf, Pollack, Stuart O'Grady. They're class sprinters. He's a quick rider. I'll be interested to see how he goes today. I'm not sure how much experience he's got in the crosswinds, but looking at the flag state, it looks like there's not too much at the moment anyway.
Not very windy, is it?
No, I think it's going to be more, my pick today, more of a selection on the camel today than the usual crosswind selection on the way up from the coast. No worries.
Stewie, good ride at the weekend in the Tour of Flanders. Not exactly the outcome that you wanted to, but it shows that you've got good form.
Yeah, a bit frustrated after last Sunday, I guess. Only frustrated because I think I got the form's there to do a bit better. And you know, I've been looking forward to that race for about 18 months after missing it last year. And you know, every race I've done has been in build-up and preparation for this week. So you know, we hope to get a big victory.
This is the kind of race where you'll be looking for a breakaway down towards the end, and of course it is, I think, going to be all very much decided on the Camel this year because of the lack of the wind.
Yeah, I think it'll actually, because of the lack of wind and rain and snow, that it's probably going to be a pretty easy race. I think, you know, when you're in relation to these ones of the past, I think it'll probably be a pretty big sprint.
Well, good luck.
Thanks, mate.
Well, first of all, JJ, congratulations on your win the other day.
Thank you, Alex. It's the first win, so it has a little bit different taste than the other ones, no?
Well, first win, I mean, you had two very nice wins in the Tour of California, but there, Alessandro Patacchi, Graham Brown, some big names.
Yeah, that's what it makes a little bit different too, and you know, coming to Europe is always a challenge, and you can hear people say he will make it, he won't make it, so I just want to show that I could win here too.
Well, I've heard a lot of the other riders from other teams mentioning the name JJ Haedo as a possible winner today.
We will see. It's a different race. We got to take it easy. It's still my first year. I'm getting a lot of experience here, and hopefully I can use more in the future. Thank you.
Congratulations. Sunday in the Tour of Flanders showed that you had the form. Were you a little bit frustrated by the other riders just hanging onto your wheel?
Yes and no, but finally I know what's wrong. It was too early, but for Paris-Roubaix I think it was also not bad to do something. I see now what's happened when the race is when the race is dry, when the weather is when it's beautiful weather, when we are so many riders, we have to wait. And I think Sunday for Paris-Roubaix is maybe the same. It's 24 degrees, I heard, it's sunshine, good weather, everything is dry, and I think that's maybe the same. I have to wait, and when I go, I think I go. And this mostly of the riders, they know this and they wait until this moment. But I want to make the clever and the smartest on Sunday, and not make the wrong that I make it on Tour of Flanders.
It's a different kind of race too, Paris-Roubaix, because the cobblestones are a lot longer and a lot worse, and you can make a big difference on them.
Yeah, I like them, and I know I can do it. And we have everything. We have good bikes, tires, wheels. We have everything. The whole team is there. The luck, I know I have to search in the front, and I'm sure that I'm going to do it. And I'm in the head ready for Paris-Roubaix. Thanks.
Hey?
Pettigan was just here if we want to get him.
Oh, the race is gone.
Hello everybody, I'm Phil Liggett. Joining me in the commentary box is Paul Schoen, and this is the 69th running of the race between Gent and Wevelgem in Belgium. In fact, the race itself starting from Deinze and heading into the finish down in Wevelgem. One of the semi-classics in Belgium, bringing together all the top Pro Tour teams and bridges the gap between the Tour of Flanders Classic and the Paris-Roubaix Classic in France. There's a few of the recent winners for you. Philippe Gaumont is in the race again today, as is Tom Steels. Sadly, George Hincapie, the American, not here, who won this race in 2001 because he broke his wrist in a crash in the Tour of California, and he's still in the recovery mode for that. Tom Bonen, another former winner, is riding today after his crash in the Tour of Flanders. And Nico Martin, also a winner, the defending champion, Thor Hushovd. All of those riders in the race today.
Well, this is the scene at the finishing line, but earlier on, a lot of riders were getting themselves rather excited about the sign-in, but I think, Phil, a lot of riders concerned today about the fact that there's not very much wind. This is the overall classification of the Pro Tour, and that was after the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Still the leader, Alberto Contador, the man who this year won himself very early on Paris-Nice in quite dramatic style.
And this is the route the riders face. They start in Deinze and then they head out to the coast via Ostend, run down the coast of the North Sea, and then they go back inland to what is 10 climbs of the day down in the base, but the two big ones indeed are the double climb of the Kemmelberg, where they do 2 laps down there before they come off the circuit and race into the finish here in Wevelgem. And those are the tough circuits today, and I can tell you straight away there is a small breakaway clear. But before we fill you in with that, let's have a look here at the start. This is Fabio Baldato earlier today. Finished third in this race back in 1996.
Well, looking down here at Daniel Benati's name, NP means non partant. He's not starting today, Phil, because of the fact he had an overnight stomach illness.
Tom Steele's back after his injury recently in the Tour of Qatar. Francisco Ventoso, who's had 3 wins in the Castilla-Leon race this year already. So he's on form. Baden Cooke finished 6th in this race in 2005.
Jimmy Casper, a good sprinter from Unibet. He's already had a victory so far this season. But this is the team everyone thinks, Phil, has got a very good chance of winning. Gert Stegemans and Team Quickstep.
2 wins this year already for Gert Stegemans. So he's on form. This is the champion of Estonia, Erik Putsep. He finished 8th in this race last year. Hope for a little bit better in glorious conditions today. Champion of Switzerland, Gregory Rast.
Yep, he's a good squad member on Team Astana. And this is the champion of Belgium. And we've seen him riding very well so far this season. Nico Eekhout, always very popular with the Flandrian crowd.
Best place ever, 6th in this race, 2001. Philippe Gilbert, François Desjeux. The Belgian on a French team, finished 6th in Hepvolk. Rather won Hepvolk last year. And this is Andy Capel of the Landbau Crédit team. All smiles, lovely spring conditions and very warm indeed. Staff Sheelings, here he is the Cofidis rider here.
Little known rider, but rode exceptionally well in the early part of the season, and this is the man that Cofidis expect to ride well, Nick Noyens. He's got a very good chance of winning this race, and of course interesting to see how Peter van Petegem is going to perform. He normally doesn't ride too hard in this race, thinking very much more about the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix.
At the end of a long career for Peter van Petegem, Nico Matana won this race in controversial style back in 2005. And the arrival of Juan Antonio Fletcher, we've seen he's on form after a great ride in the Tour of Flanders. He was 2nd in this race 2 years ago. It's unusual to get a Spanish rider finishing up near the front in the Belgian races.
Yeah, but Fletcher's a very good rider when it comes to these kind of races. Watch out for this man too, Marcus Burghardt of T-Mobile. A lot of people are tipping this man for great things.
3rd in the Grand Prix E3, not too far away this year, so he's got good form. Bernhard Eisel, former champion of Austria, won a stage in the Tour of the Algarve, finished 7th in this event in 2006. And Olaf Pollack as well, who's already got a win under his belt. And this is Olaf Pollack in the Wiesenhof jersey.
A lot of changes this winter, very difficult getting to remember all of the different colours of the riders have changed, many of them changing from T-Mobile. We're looking here at David Kopp, who finished in the top 3 in this race last year.
Yes, he was runner-up and coming back after his big crash he had in the recent Milan-San Remo. Luca Paolini, 3rd in the Tour of Flanders a few days ago. We'll hope for a repeat of that. And the question is, when will Stuart O'Grady here get a win? Because he's so close to doing it every time he rides. And one man who keeps beating perhaps is Robbie McEwen. Very, very popular here in Belgium. And never had a good result in this race, by the way, but maybe that'll change today. Alessandro Patacchi should be the fastest sprinter in the world, but doesn't seem to have the confidence these days after his bad crash last year.
Just needs a bit of luck. This is Oscar Freire, 3 times a champion of the world. He too has not got very many great performances in the Gent Wevelgem race, but I think he might do something today. And also Filippo Pozzato finished in the top 10 last year. He'll be looking to go a little bit better this year.
Well, he's won one of the semi-classics here in March. Hepvolk, Juan Jose Haido, the Argentinian on CSC, who got his first big victory just 24 hours ago. And Fabian Cancellara there. Thor Hushovd, last year's winner, signing in. Complains his form's not quite as good as he would expect. And last man to go, Tom Bonen, and he just manages to sign in, and then he's in a bit of a rush because the actual race has just left the start town. The flag was going up as Tom was signing in there. So a quick dash to the start for Tom Bonen, and it may well be a quick dash to the finish too for the popular Belgian, because he would like to win this race. I think the last time he won it was in 2004 when he was just a developing man as far as the Belgian professionals were concerned. Everybody underway.
In fact, I think it was at the finish of that Gent Wevelgem, Phil, that he actually crashed into the photographers after the finish line, and he's still suffering a little bit from a back injury from that incident.
I think you're right. There's Peter van Petegem just plugging his little earpiece in. Here comes Tom Bonen, realizing they've all gone without him, but he'll quickly catch up. Now let's go to the action as we move along onto the course. Now that all happened in Deinze a couple of hours ago. These three riders got clear after just 30 kilometres of racing. This is Roger Hammond in his new T-Mobile colours for Great Britain. The other riders with him are Florent Brad in the Caisse d'Apan, and this is Christophe Mengin of the FDJ Française de Jeux team from France. And these three riders getting clear after 30 kilometres. They built a lead of almost 12 minutes. The last we heard was that the gap was down to 8 3/4, and it could well be less than that right now.
But strange to see Roger Hammond in third position there, wearing the pink jersey of T-Mobile. We've got used to him over the last couple of seasons wearing the Team Discovery Channel jersey. But he had said, Phil, before the start of Paris-Roubaix, he wanted to get himself a good performance. Another rider who spends most of his time living throughout the European season here in Belgium. So he's obviously pretty much feeling as if he's riding on a home crowd.
Yes, he speaks fluent Flemish, and he always impresses the Belgian people with his accent. So he's very happy here. Started out life riding cyclocross and then got into the top professional teams. Unusual, I think, to have seen him making a move like this, because he's a rider who gets good results in this event, and he's also got bad stories from it where he's crashed as well. But he's not leaving anything to a late run to the finish with the leaders. He seems to have gone out very early, and normally one would say he really is committing suicide today as far as the race is concerned, because normally they'll bring it back. Just over 50 miles, or 82 kilometres still to run to the finish. And the gap is down, you see, 7 minutes 23 seconds.
Yeah, but he's got two good workhorses with him. The rider in the white jersey is Christophe Mengin, former national cyclocross champion of France, and the man on the back is the national champion of France as they head here through Poperinghe. That is Florent Brad. Only won one race last year, but at least it was a good one.
Yes, and it's always nice to wear your colours of your national champion colours instead of the black of his team, which would be the team of Caisse d'Apan. We're into Poperinghe now. As we're heading down towards the climbs of the Kemmelberg, we'll see both of the climbs of the riders over the Kemmel. The cobble brute with the nerve-wracking descent that even the riders are afraid of. And before the start today, talking to some of them, they're very frightened of the fact that there's hardly any wind again. We are in such a warm spell of weather here, like we've never known before in Belgium for the Spring Classics. And without any wind, which is highly unusual, there's a lot of riders being left in contention and a lot of riders taking risks. And that's why they are telling us there was lots of crashes in the Tour of Flanders last Sunday. And it might well be the pattern again today as we race to the finish. Anyway, 7 1/4 minutes. There is our first sight of the big peloton. Best part of 200 riders in the field today. And those three riders just over 7 minutes ahead.
Well, you can see now a little bit of organisation coming to the front, and I think you're right. We will see a massive charge, though, once we start to get over towards the Kemmelberg, because nobody wants to have to fight in a 150-man field going to that left-hand corner at the bottom of the Kemmel, because it is very dangerous indeed. But everyone here, Phil, will want to try and get around that corner in the top 10. And it'll be, I think, one of the largest main fields we've seen coming into the Heuvelland, as it's called, in that part of Belgium for many, many years. Because certainly, although the wind is starting to come up a fraction now, it's not what we're used to in Gent Wevelgem.
No, it usually pushes the riders into a long, thin line. Everybody scrabbling to hold on to the wheel in front and wait for the change of direction before they can move forward. A few riders taking a little risk there, too, in cutting across somebody's front garden. As they get back onto the route, we go back to the leaders. Long, empty roads just now. And the gap coming down pretty quickly, actually. Exactly 80 kilometres left, and it's just on about 7 minutes, the gap. And so they're just hoping that the pattern will change as soon as they get onto the small climbs, which take us onto the circuit, which we do twice. And the giant of the circuit is, of course, the Kemmelberg climb.
Well, it all starts off once these riders come into town. They go over the, once they come into the area of Heuvelland, they go first over climb which is known locally as the Mont Noir, or the Black Mountain, following the little entrance into the town of Westouter. Then they go around to start that circuit. They've got that very difficult climb of the Monteberg, where you normally see a little bit of a sorting out of the front end of the main field before they descend for about 1.5 kilometers and then turn left onto the very steep Kemmel. But I think, as you said earlier, Phil, the most dangerous thing about the Kemmel is actually the descent off the sides. A lot of riders, basically, they just hold on for dear life going down there. And it's an area where, in the past, I've got a bit of experience where I actually was going down the descent of the Kemmel and blew out 2 tyres at once. Unfortunately, I didn't come off.
Well, that's amazing.
I did go into the field, though.
It is a straight descent, but really the best way to go down, I think, is to close your eyes and just drop off it. because it is frightening. But we'll see. It's dry at least today. When we've had it in rainy conditions, riders have fallen down there many, many times. These are the riders, though, trying to make the most of the race today. And Christophe Mengin getting himself into the early move. Only had 7 wins in his career, by the way, Christophe Mengin. And not really had a big one, but he's also, funnily enough, like Roger Hammond, he came in through cyclocross, where he was the champion of France back in 1998. Time out on the left there from riders from CSC, so that's an indication the chase is not yet on as they move across. Interesting entry today is the arrival of the Italian sprinter Alessandro Petacchi. People saying he's lost a little bit of his nerve having crashed last year, and it's a long fight back, and the sprints of course are highly dangerous affairs, and he was beaten 2 days ago by Haedo and by Graham Brown of Australia, and both of those riders in the race today.
Well, Graham Brown explained to me just before the start that he was a little bit surprised to get beaten by Haedo, because he could see himself going past Alessandro Petacchi and thought, right mate, that's good, I'm going to have a little bit of this. Then all of a sudden there was a burst on his right hand side, and that was JJ Haedo. But for Haedo, this might be a very difficult race to try and shine in, because it's his first attempt here at Gent Wevelgem, and it's a race where you do need a little bit of experience to know exactly where the climbs are. But with a pilot fish like Stuart O'Grady to look after him, he should be all right.
Well, we'll see. But you're absolutely right. Racing in Belgium is so different to anywhere else in the world of cycling, I think. For a start, all the roundabouts and the traffic obstructions, the cobbled roads, the bad surfaces. Normally, I'd say the change of wind direction, but there's not too much of that today. It does call for a different type of cyclist, and usually the Belgians triumph on their own ground. But last year was the first ever win for a Norwegian rider when Thor Hushovd got the verdict. But you were speaking to him earlier, Paul. You say he's not feeling so good.
Well, no, he's had a little bit of a chest infection over the last couple of days. He says the form is starting to get that little bit better. But when a rider tells you that, maybe he's just trying to hide his game a fraction, because Thor Hushovd, if he gets a chance, I'm sure would like to come up with a win here. But it's going to be a strange race, I think, because of the fact that the weather is so nice as the main field now strings their way through Poperang. Poperang really very much the gateway to that area called the Heuvelland, which is a great area of Belgium to actually go for bike rides. Fairly undulating, and if you get a day like this when there's no wind, it's actually very nice for the tourist cyclist.
And especially today, because the sun is high in the sky, it's absolutely beautiful. It's very, very warm. It's about 22 degrees at the moment, and this is mostly, they're talking of 25 degrees for the upcoming Paris-Roubaix race on Sunday, so that's going to really be an exceptionally warm day for riders for their journey across the hell of northern France, which are the cobbled roads. They'll get their taste of cobbles today as well, but nothing like they will on Sunday, as they continue to make the pace here. The battle will start soon now. The pace will pick up gradually, because they'll want to be first onto the Kemmelberg itself, and the only way you can be sure of that is to ride at the front. And as everybody wants to be at the front at that time, the pace just simply gets quicker and quicker.
Well, although they're not really chasing in earnest yet, they're having an effect on that time gap, because you can see when we started commentating, the gap was just over 8 minutes. It's now just inside of 7 minutes, so it's going in the right direction for the main field. I have a feeling that that was a long suicide attempt by Roger Hammond and the 2 French riders, and I'm pretty certain they will get caught, but they should survive to get to the Kemmel for the first loop.
Well, it's a shame. The whole race distance is 207 kilometers today, and we've got those 77 left, so 130 has passed by, which puts the breakaway out front for 100 kilometers right now, and the gap has been halved in the last hour or so of racing, because they were out to almost 12 minutes.
Well, Team Astana in the pale blue jerseys on the front here, obviously trying to whip up the pace, making a fraction, and I think they'll probably be thinking about their man René Hasselbacher if it comes down to the sprint down towards the end.
Yes, Astana have got riders who are capable. These are the workhorses now. Servais Knaven coming through from Quick Step. A lot of teams deciding to send riders up. Not good news for the leaders, but a good indication that a number of their team leaders have decided they might want to win today. Lotto have got 1 rider up here on the front. It looks like Tom Steele's working away there. I don't think it is.
It actually is Tom
Is
Steels.
it Tom Steels? I was wondering what he was doing up here, because he's a sprinter, but yeah.
Yeah, but Tom is making his way back to the top end of the sport after having that very nasty accident in the Tour of Qatar, and I was amazed to see him riding already in the places in the 3 days of La Plana, because he actually crashed after a little contretemps with Graham Brown and broke his collarbone. But he's back and competitive.
And they're both in the race today, and there really was some angry words after that accident, and the finger was pointed at Graham Brown of Australia, and the riders were chanting for him to leave the race, which he didn't do, of course, and Graham is having quite a good season right now. Steels is back in action, and maybe that's why he's using this race today to just get some racing form into those legs. To a professional cyclist, a ride like today of just over 200 kilometers is the perfect distance to find your form again.
And of course they're all thinking about Robbie McEwen, who on a day like today, with the weather conditions being so ideal, has got a very good chance of getting himself the victory in a race that, after Milan-San Remo, is probably very much regarded, and in the past has always been regarded, as a sprinter's race, although in recent years it's very often been dominated by a breakaway.
Well, what a lovely picture that is of the peloton now getting a lot longer in length, stretching out like a piece of elastic, and the gap coming inside 6.5 minutes. The team of CSC have taken time out, now returning into the race group here, led by Matti Breschel. He was number 61, and this rider here is the man that they would hope today will deliver first place for them, Juan Jose Haedo. He's an Argentinian, but spends most of his racing life in America, but now he's got his first big chance for a Pro Tour team, CSC taking him this year.
Well, you see how seriously they're looking after him there. That was Stuart O'Grady as well. This is Fabian Cancellara. He made a massive big move in the Tour of Flanders, a little bit too far to go, and made probably a tactical error, but he said he wanted to make the race look a little bit more interesting for the television fans. I think he's going to be a man who will be very difficult to beat on Sunday in Paris-Roubaix, because one or two of the riders said the power that he showed on Sunday, last Sunday in Tour of Flanders, was absolutely phenomenal.
That must have been an Australian timeout, I think, there, because Discovery Channel's Matt White just came back with them, and so too did Rabobank's Graham Brown. So they all came back in that group. Now they're getting ready to move to the front and wait for the first assault of the Kemmelberg. Well, there's a massive crowd waiting at the top of the climb, as there always is, because especially on a day like today, it's going to be the most idyllic place to watch this race from.
I've got to say, the pub at the top is certainly going to be full. It is a great place to watch the race here, Gent Wevelgem. You get two chances of seeing the riders come round over the top of the Kemmel, and there's a great bar at the top where you can run straight back into to see all of the action live on TV. And the atmosphere up there, I think today is going to be phenomenal.
Nothing changing at the front at the moment now, but it's good to see so many different teams up here. The orange of Rabobank, the light blues of Astana. This is the Lotto, Tom Steels, former champion of Belgium, who's won this race on a couple of occasions. It's fair to say it won't be another victory, I don't think, today for Tom, but that's why he's working at the front here now, early on, as it were. Team Milram, sadly, with Pataki, but without Eric Zabel, who had that rather nasty-looking crash a few days ago in the Tour of Flanders. Apparently not too badly injured, but he'll need a couple of weeks before he can get back into the top line again.
Was number one, last year's winner, Thor Hushovd, sitting at the back end of the main field. On a day like today, it's not as risky as normal, because normally in this part of the world, leaving Poperang, you can expect the race to be spread across the road in echelons, diagonal lines of riders just trying to shelter from the wind, but certainly hardly any wind at all. There's a big peloton there, Phil, looking down there, and you can see everybody taking every risk possible to get to the front of the main field, because they're starting to get just that little bit twitchy now.
Yes, well, where the riders on the left are, they're actually on the cycle path, and that's what you have to ride on in Belgium. You're not allowed to ride on the road if there is a cycle path. Robbie McEwen just slipping out of our sight there as well. But when, of course, the races are on, the roads are totally closed. Just looking, old habits die hard, I guess.
Just looking at the faces of the riders now, Phil, they are starting to take this just a little bit more seriously, starting to get that little bit crisper and more nervous as they try to battle to stay at the front end of the main field. The rider in the dark blue there is Wilfred Kretjens. He'll be thinking about the possibility of Tom Boonen getting himself a victory. Although a lot of riders are saying that possibly they may try and give a chance to Gert Stegmans, who rode very well at the weekend for Tom Boonen and the rest of the team. For Boonen, I think he just wants to see how his body is. Very sore after the Tour of Flanders. He went down in a crazy crash after just 60 kilometers and injured both his knees and his wrist. And I have to take my hat off to him for getting up and carrying on, but after all, it was for him, as far as he was concerned, the World Championship of Flanders.
It's a big race for the Belgians. Every Belgian cyclist wants to win the Tour of Flanders course. Tom has won it for the last 2 years until this time. He was trying to become only the second person to win it 3 years straight. That wasn't to be. As we look here, Alan Johansson, second from right, champion of Denmark. Chocolat Jacques sending their riders up as well now. They're the riders in the white jerseys and red tops there. And Astana working very, very well now with quite a few of the riders. It's getting an interesting pattern forming at the front now as we head towards the 6-minute gap. As these riders and those again taking chances now. There's talk of anarchy in the bunch today because there is again no wind. The flags, we had a breeze moments ago. The flags are now still once more outside our commentary position. And riders apparently without the wind to break up the pack, riders all begin to believe they can win this race, as was the case in the Tour of Flanders. And because they were taking such risks to hold position or make gaps in the peloton that simply weren't there, they were falling off in the strangest of places on perfectly straight roads where you wouldn't expect riders to crash. The peloton just collapsed like a pack of cards. And so there's a lot of feeling and apparently a lot of nervous riders in the race today.
And there's going to be a lot more nervous, I think, Phil, once we get to the Monteberg and the Kemmelberg for the first time. We're just now going through the small town of Renning-Helst. And once the riders have gone through there, they'll head out towards Loker and Westouter. And that's when they will get a chance to go over the small climb, which we call the Mont Noir, the Zwarteberg, or the Black Mountain. And that's during these summer months, although it's very much spring-like this afternoon, it's an area which is sort of a small resort and people come out to spend some nice time in the country.
Well, it's good to see Tom Steele's back at the front here now. 35 years of age, Tom. He's coming to the end of a great career which began back in 1994. He's won almost 100 races since he turned pro, and he's been the national...
Thor Hushovd got a problem at the back.
That's bad luck. Now, you don't need this when you're last year's winner and you're complaining of not great form, but a terrific wheel change. Matter of a couple of seconds that. The cars are still with him, so it'll be routine, this one, once he gets underway, and he'll get back in. I think we can have a look at it again.
I think we need to, because that's probably the quickest wheel change I've seen this year. There you go. Watch this. Real professional.
1,
straight out.
2, 3, 4, 5, and about 6 seconds. I think if you beat 9, you're going good.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, Thor did not panic at all. The mechanic was there immediately. Now, the mechanics already, they actually have a set of dummy forks in the back of the car there, so they can set the quick release.
Yep.
So it's exactly the right size to slide the wheel in and then close it immediately. And so I think Thor Hushovd will very quickly be back in the main field. There he is, and he's got a teammate dropping back to help pace him. But as is often the case, he's a little bit stronger than the teammate. That is Cyril Lemoine, who's been sent back to look after him. But I don't think there's any panic because there's no major chase at the front end of the peloton yet.
And here comes Thor Hushovd. He can't stay behind that car too long, but the judges will turn a blind eye for a few seconds or so. Then you've got to move forward, and that's what's happening. The teammate going with him, Cyril Lemoine of the Crédit Agricole team. One French rider and one Norwegian on the French team as they now rapidly rejoin the breakaway. Not easy. They make it look easy, but it isn't easy. They'll be a little out of breath here as they make their way back up, because the peloton just now is probably moving at round about 43, 44 kilometers an hour.
Just looking there at the number on Thor Hushovd, he's dragging quite a bit of air into that number. He obviously didn't spend the right amount of time fixing that this morning, and that might just cause a bit of drag down towards the end. Just over to the right there, you can start to see the hilly area, or the Heuvelland. That is the Black Mountain and the Red Mountain. The riders will have to move over to the right-hand side first, circumnavigate that little lump in the middle of the Flanders, and then ride over it and head then over towards Westouter, and then into the town of Loker, then the Monteberg, and then the Kemmelberg for the first time.
Going back many hundreds of years, the Kemmelberg used to be part of the beach here in Belgium, and there's still lots of sand there, funnily enough, but now it's very much a long way inland as the riders are bound for it today, and you'll see what we're talking about when you see the crowds that are waiting there. Not much room for movement down there, Paul.
Well, as you said, and that's why there's been so many crashes. That's why it's so dangerous, because everybody wants to get to the front. But there are so many riders locked across the road there. There's very few occasions to move forward. There's Graham Brown, the third placed orange rider there, just going out of out of view once again. He's got a very good chance of getting himself the victory here this afternoon, although he did say that if it came down to a bunch sprint and Oscar Freire was there, he would be looking after Oscar Freire's chances, because he says as far as he's concerned, Freire is one of the fastest men in the world.
Interesting to note that. Freire, of course, having a great season already, including his victory in Milan-San Remo.
That rider halfway down there, just leaning over. You can almost see the guy's body leading over to the right-hand side. He's trying to find a moment when the road widens out. And as the road widens out, look at all these riders scurrying up to get themselves locked into the first 10 or 15 places. Everybody, I think, can feel over the last week that it's been a little bit dangerous, and that's why they want to move themselves into a position of hopefully being out of danger.
Shaking his head here is Nico Eekhout of Belgium. 13 wins for him last year. He wins a lot in his own country, but he's not really a big international rider, but he's carrying the national jersey of his country today, and that'll inspire him on. And the former champion leading the way there, Tom Steels. He actually has won that title 4 times throughout his career. And the two Belgians setting the pace.
Well, they've now taken that right-hand turn. They'll drop down a fraction now as they go down towards the small town of Westouter. This is the small town of De Kleed, as they circumnavigate the climb, which they're going to have to zigzag over 2 or 3 times. You can see a lot of riders moving up to the front now, trying to make sure that they're in a safe place at the front end of the main field. There's Freddie Rodriguez over to the right-hand side. You can just see him in the pink and black jersey of Team Predictor-Lotto. And it looks like Baden Cooke is just in front of him. Everybody now, you can almost feel the nervousness.
Now, what's happening here? Roger Hammond hanging a little bit off the breakaway. First chance we've seen of them for a while, and it's down to 5:40 now, with 68 kilometres left to ride. They will know what's going on behind. They actually wanted to try and get onto this circuit, I think, of which we're going to do it 2 times, with a lead of about 7 or 8 minutes, and that's bad luck because we've got a trouble there at the back, and that looks as though it's Reigns, Vincenti Range. It is, and he's a pretty good rider, but he's got a flat back tyre right now, and you see, unlike with Hushovd, the team car wasn't close enough, but there's the change. We're not going to see it, it seems, as we go back up to the peloton. That's the big pack. 5:40 the gap.
Well, the leading group of 3 riders, I thought last time we looked at them, I recognized the part of the road that they were on, and that was the start of the small climb out of Westouter. So they will get to the early strategic parts of this race here this afternoon with a fairly decent advantage. They won't have to battle to get themselves around that corner at the start of the Kemmelberg, but still you can see all of the time there's a lot of movement. This is Staff Sheerlinks on the front. Rode a very good Tour of Flanders, trying to look after his teammate and compatriot Nick Nuyens. But here I think they've decided enough is enough. They're going to try and lift the pace, and look at the faces of the riders behind. He's really dishing out a bit of pain.
He is. Tom Steele's grimacing there. It's Stephen Keethoven just behind him from Chocolat Jacques. But this is where they start now to turn the screw. Look how they pull the long line out of the pack at the front. And I would imagine there's a similar long line at the back now of the tired legs. With just 67 kilometres to go. They've done 140. Sheerling flicks the arm. That's a sign. Somebody come and give me a hand up here. Nobody that willing. Looks, I think it's Keethoven. He's come up to the front now. He's moved through.
Trying to look at the faces of the other riders. Everybody's very attentive. There's another big move across. You might have just seen that swing over to the left-hand side. Those are the swings that are very dangerous when there's a lot of riders still in the main field. And those are the things you want to really try and avoid. Nick Nuyens over to the left.
Yes, Cofford is the red jerseys. Tom Bonen's got to the front too. That's interesting because you're never sure when a rider of the quality of Tom Bonen, whether he's here to try and win this race or just get some training miles in. It's midweek, remember. Ready for next Sunday's Paris-Roubaix, which is a very important classic in France. And it looks to me, the fact that Tom has come to the front, he might be looking for a move on the first climb of the Kemmelberg.
Well, I think the impressive thing about Tom Bonen, look at the chaos at the back there. That's why you don't want to be at the back. Everybody's actually having to brake and slow down because they were funneled through that traffic circle there. And it's really difficult because you slow down to almost a dead stop, then you have to accelerate a lot more than the guys at the front. And if you could keep doing that throughout the length of a race like this, it really takes a lot of nervous energy out of you. And that's why the big stars like Tom Bonen, they always like to cruise up at the front end of the peloton.
It's good to see Nicky Eekhout right up at the front, the Belgian champion, knowing what's to come, trying to hold position. That's all they're trying to do just at this minute in time. This isn't Keethoven now at the front. There's been a change of riders here. The Chocolat Jacques boys. turning the screw a little bit tighter.
Well, that right-hand bend they just took now takes them down into the small little valley. Over on their left-hand side of the riders, that is the red mountain, which the riders will descend in about 5 kilometers time. They're just dropping down into the small town of Westhouten. You can see it's been fairly well ploughed. The gap is coming down consistently, Phil, to 5 minutes and 10 seconds, and another problem at the back.
There's a Gerolsteiner rider here who's gone off the back, Sven Kraus. Oh, I'm very surprised. It's what they're doing is they're nicking their tyres, because a lot of them are riding into the grass or just on the very edge of the road where the road is broken. And this is the result, I think. They're picking up bits of grit and stuff. It's going to be a much more difficult proposition now for Sven to get away. Didn't get any wins last year. He's only had one win as a professional. It was a small stage race in Italy a couple of years ago, but he is a very good all-round bike rider.
Not a good place to have a flat tyre either, because as soon as they get into this town, which they're entering here, as we can see, the town of Westhouten, they'll turn right again, and then they'll start the climb up to the summit of the Mont Noir, the Black Mountain. So for him, it's going to be a rather difficult little effort to try and get himself first of all onto the back end of the main field, and then to try and move up through it. Tom Steels, I think, has decided this afternoon that he's definitely going to be the super domestique. He's using an awful lot of energy to keep up at the front end of the main field. That's the left-hand turn, as they will now start to leave Westhouten. And just a little bit further up the road, these guys have already crested the climb of Westhouten. They're about to go over this another little climb here. This is the Red Mountain. They'll drop down, and they're now looking at around about 5 kilometers to go before they get to the start of the Monteberg. This is the Rodeberg.
A nice crowd here as well as they come over the top. And this rider here at the back is Jimmy Engoulevent. Oh dear me, another flat tire. Amazing. And Crédit Agricole have had one problem with Hushovd. Now they better get another front wheel out. Unusual to see front wheels flat, and that's the second one they've had in about 3 kilometers.
But I think you hit the nail on the head. You see a lot of riders are taking crazy risks to try and get themselves to the front, and they're using the cycle paths and the little bits of cobbles. And with it being so dry, there's a lot of dry grit out on the road, and especially just sticking up through the cobblestones, and that's where these small flints are being picked up, and they're eventually cutting their way through into the tyres.
But look at the tempo now at the front. It's really pulling this peloton out. Gaps are forming over the heads of these riders. There's a lot of riders scrabbling for wheels now. Desperation. I'm not too sure that Hammond is feeling too good now. He's just gone over the top of the Rodeberg, making that short descent. But we're into the hilly zones now. Very soon we'll be making the turn onto the Kemmelberg for the first time. And these boys are going to be clear by the Kemmel, that's for sure.
Tell you what, the gap is coming down pretty dramatic, though.
It is.
It's, or in about 24 kilometers, they've lost 4 minutes of their advantage. They had a maximum lead at one stage of over 12 minutes, but it is seriously tumbling now. I could see them losing a good 1.5 minutes just on the ascent of the Kemmelberg alone. Taking the right-hand turn here, they'll now ride down to the small town of Loker, and there they'll turn left and start the Monteberg.
Oh, they like the Riviera out here. It is so different to the other sections of Flanders in Belgium. Beautiful country inns and a lot of pasture land as well. But it is a racing cyclist paradise, of course. Many of the riders coming here for training, the Vidanienberg.
Well, they call it here the Vidanienberg, but it's always in the past been known as the Zwarteberg, or the Black Mountain.
Yeah.
And that's what the area at the top is called. But it is a fairly difficult climb. Gets a little bit steeper once you get up towards the summit, but you can see a lot of riders still taking those risks to try and get themselves in the first 2 lines of riders, because they know that the action is going to start over the top, and they'll really start to wind it up, because it's going to be a mass charge, Phil, to get to that left-hand bend before the Kemmel.
That's absolutely right. And it takes a strong man to can use up so much energy to hold position at the front that when you get to the climb, you just slip completely away from it. But we'll see. At this stage of the game, with 63 kilometers to go, there's going to be 100 bike riders here, all thinking they can win this race, including probably Tony Cruz from Team Discovery Channel, who's just off to our left there, right at the front. As meanwhile, life at the back is not so sweet with Alexander Kuzinski.
Well, in fact, it's not sweet at all, because it looks to me as if he's going to slip off the back end of this group. And also the leader of Euskaltel Euskadi, and that is Andoni Aranga. He's also, I think, about to call it quits. I think when they get to the top of this climb, Phil, they'll disappear. And there's, not surprisingly enough, Vravis Bolosevic's going out of the back. Very strange.
They've given up very early on, I must say. There is a shortcut back to Wevelgem, and that's probably the way they'll take it.
Well, we're only about, Phil, 30 kilometres away from the finish line where these riders are, and I think you'll find that one or two of those riders, instead of turning to the right to go over to Kemmel, they'll turn left and take the short road home.
Job done for the day. Of course, you don't know whether they're actually dropping off because they're tired or they're dropping off because they feel that they've done 140 kilometres today, and the big ride on Sunday nearly 260, and that's the Paris-Roubaix, so they may have felt that's enough for me for one day. But we'll see. There are the riders at the back. You see the difference now these hills are making to the peloton. Even so, Paul, that's a very tight bunch at the front.
It certainly is. A lot of nervous riders. It's a strange race sometimes, Gent Wevelgem, to try and read, because it's linking two of the great monuments of the sport, the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. So some riders feel that they don't really want to dig too deeply into their reserves, maybe not having completely recovered from the Tour of Flanders, but also not wanting to use too much energy leading up to Paris-Roubaix the next Sunday.
4:40 the gap as we head on to the Rodeberg, the Red Mountain.
Massive elevation of 40 meters with a maximum of 16% at the top. But it's a strange climb because it actually starts off very steadily, then it kicks up for the last 40 or 50 meters, and that's where it's very difficult. But look at the faces of these guys now, Phil. They're not messing about here at all. Luca Paolini over to the right-hand side. I wonder if Pippo Pozzato will try and do something towards the end of this race as well.
Oh, and there's
that's why you don't ride at the back. Somebody's gone down.
Somebody's fallen there.
That is Servaes Knaven.
It is. Former champion of the Netherlands, and he's hurt himself there. Doesn't know quite what's happened, I don't think. But there's been a shunt. There was two riders down, certainly. The other one's gone. But Servaes has landed on his hip, and he may have hit one of the legs of those barriers. That could be quite painful.
The
Let's hope he's okay.
Doctor's there straight away to look after him, check on him, and make sure whether or not it's safe for him to carry on in the race or whether he needs to be put into the ambulance. He's an experienced campaigner brought onto T-Mobile during the winter transfer, I think, just to bring a little bit more experience to the team, which has almost been completely reformed and revamped by Bob Stapleton. Knaven's up.
Well, that's a good sign, because I was wondering there if you may have...
Well, there's the crash there. It's almost halfway down the main field. In fact, you were right, there were a couple of riders, 3 or 4 actually went down. But again, it's in that very dangerous part of the main field, around about 60th position. I don't think Knaven is going to continue with his ride here this afternoon. And that's not surprising. He doesn't want to take too many risks. Let's have another look. You can just see it's over there to the right. This is why it is so dangerous to ride at the back end of the main field. See, Luke Roberts was at the back too there from Team CSC. But sad to see. Knaven's had a great career as well. He's been the Dutch national champion, won a stage in the Tour de France into Bordeaux. And of course, probably his most famous victory was that in Paris-Roubaix a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. A total of 27 wins in a career which began quite a long time ago now. We seem to have been talking about it for a few years. 1994 was his first season as a pro. So he's gone well over the average career of a professional cyclist, which they say is about 8 years.
This is the Monteberg. The Monteberg is their little climber. It's the hors d'oeuvre, if you like, for the Kemmelberg. But fortunately for these 3 riders, they don't have to battle it out at all, because it will be a serious battle here in a few moments' time. Well, about 4 minutes and 28 seconds time when the main field starts to get to this point, because this is the leapfrog part of the race to get themselves ready for the Kemmelberg. Roger Hammond still looking fairly good. I still have a hard time getting used to him in that T-Mobile jersey. I think it's the first time I've actually seen him race this season.
Well, he looks quite strong and quite confident just now. Hammond, he's had a good career too. He was pro since 1998. Loca now. 4:25 the gap, just 60 kilometres left to run, but unfortunately for the riders in front, they've got all the hard roads still ahead of them. And then it's a long, flat route down to Wevelgem of around about 25 kilometres into town. So if they need a good lead, otherwise the chase will be happening on the final few kilometres. Here we are back with the leaders again now. Still a cavalry charge. A lot of guys want to be on the front. They're fanning across the whole road. Our old friend in the centre picture with the red top, Stuart O'Grady of Australia, always at the front, always near the winner's prize, never quite gets the win these last 2 years. He needs a big result just for a peace of mind, I think.
Also in the green jersey right at the front there was Stefan Wesermann. It's difficult to recognize him now in that green jersey of Team Wiesenhof. Been so many years riding for T-Mobile that we almost associated him with that squad. But his contract wasn't renewed at the end of the season. But he did say this morning, Phil, that he was very comfortable with Team Wiesenhof, and it was a great atmosphere on board that team. Everyone's getting very nervous now. You can see the hands are coming off the handlebars every now and again.
Somebody's gone straight in fact, the bike's still moving.
That is.
It is Alan Johansson, isn't it?
Yeah, he's gone right down and off the road there. Obviously, you see, trying to move up, trying to take the risks to try and get himself up to the front end of the main field. And I think he's lost a little bit of wind there, more shock than anything else.
Well, the champion of Denmark in a ditch, and that was a nasty tumble because it was rather a deep fall. I think he got hit in the chest by his bike there too as he rolled down. Fortunately, at least the landing was soft, and I think he's just winded.
Well, the doctor's having a busy day here this afternoon. Certainly, he's not been enjoying his Gent Wevelgem. He's been in and out of the car all the time. Now look at that. He was obviously, you see, riding over to the right-hand side, and he's pretty lucky he didn't hit those plastic bollards.
Yes.
I remember a few years ago in the 3 days of La Panna seeing exactly the same thing happen to Sean Kelly. Everybody was riding in a big echelon across the road, and all of a sudden the wind stopped, and Kelly ended up going into the gutter. Unfortunately, on that occasion, the gutter was full of water. But Sean can swim, so we're all right.
So, which is more than I can do. So, we're looking at Johansson, looking at his bike there. The time they get that sorted, he may as well take the ride back into the finish. I think he's not going to catch up with the group now. Tom Steels has got himself back onto the front. That's O'Grady, sent a picture as well. As they now try to consolidate. The rider in white on the right too is Baden Cooke, another man who's riding pretty well this year. Another very fast sprinter. This is beginning to develop now. A race of the sprinters are trying to force their way up to the front. But here's the boys now heading on to the Kemmelberg. This is the first climb as they've made that left turn. This is the narrow entry, you see, that the peloton is racing to try and hold front position to get the first sight of. It doesn't look very steep, but believe me, this is a really steep climb.
It's a horrible climb because you can see the riders here are actually on the easy part of the climb, if I dare say that. Once they get around the corner just up in front, when you can see the limit of those banners, the road swings to the left-hand side, and then just as you're feeling as if your energy is about to run out, it kicks up one more time, and you've got to find something very special just to get yourself up to the line, and then a little bit of a chance to breathe, and then it's down the other descent.
Well, they've hit the Kemmel with a 4 1/4 minute advantage here. That should keep them away for a little while longer yet, and they're looking to me as though they're all climbing pretty strongly. Florent Brad, the champion of France, is bringing them up towards the summit. When you come round the corner here, you find this climb still goes on a little bit further yet, but they've got a good gap here.
Well, this is the steeper part of the climb here, and everybody's waiting to see who's going to come around that corner in first position. But I have to say, I do think that, in fact, Roger Hammond is riding fairly well here this afternoon. He's obviously, I think, looking for a ride in a race like Gent Wevelgem here, Phil, to boost his morale a fraction. In fact, he's accelerating to try and pick himself up a few points as he gets up to the summit of the Kemmel. There he is, leading them over the top. As he gets up to the top, he's onto the smooth part of the road. As a little bit further back, we can see now this is Lars Mikkelsen, a former winner of this race, and he too now has been asked to do the work as the team helper or team domestique, just trying to remove a little bit of the panic from the front end of the main field. And the only way to do that is actually just to whip up the pace like this.
Yes, Lars bearing the bandage on his right knee there from the accident he had in the Tour of Flanders a couple of days ago. Now looking for a little bit of action, see if he see who is watching and waiting here, because they're going to make that turn in just a couple of minutes' time. They too will then be on the first ascent of the Kemmelberg. And then you'll see a change of formation as the strongmen try to split this. Very often the peloton will hit it so quickly that there'll be about 30 or 40 riders clear over the top. This is the descent we're telling you about, and believe me, this is not for the nervous. Your bike is bouncing all the way down, and there's been another crash on the way up, can you believe, in the peloton. And this rider here is Heinrich Hausler. He went down the other day in the Tour of Flanders.
Well, I tell you what, Phil, you dare not ride at the back in any of these races at the moment. You see how long the main field is. Let's have a look. That crash was right in the middle. Again, around about 50th to 60th place, and Hausler gone down very hard. He's going to have a hard time getting himself to the Kemmelberg now. Just looking at the back end of the main field, this is Luke Roberts, number 62. He's obviously not enjoying his ride through the Heuvelland this afternoon.
Not yet. There's the incident again. and he's gone down with a rider from, I think it's Cofidis there, who's gone down with him as well. And if it is, it will be Mathieu Heiboer, who was the other man involved in that.
Well, the main field are now whipping themselves up. You can see all those guys at the back have pretty much now, Phil, given up the fight to try and get into the corner. I did notice that Tom Boonen was in the first 4 or 5 places. He likes this climb and maybe would like to try and emulate his old compere Johan Museeuw, who always used to like to dictate the pace here in Gent Wevelgem on this climb of the Kemmelberg.
Well, it's quite likely this peloton will break on the climb, and only the strong men will stay at the head of the race for the second circuit. And therefore, if you're feeling strong, start for goodness sake near the front. There's the turn. Nice angle from the helicopter. Is this Baden Cooke? No, yes, it is Baden Cooke who's got to the front for Australia. Good start for the Aussie sprinter, the man from Melbourne.
But right behind him is
Look at the queue, you see, look at the queue. They're all slowing down to go around the corner, and they never recover from that slowdown effect.
Well, you don't. You start the Kemmelberg already stopped. Now look at Boonen over there on the left-hand side, looking fairly comfortable. Greg Henderson is riding nicely too, right up on his wheel. Over to the right, you can just see a couple of riders. It looks as if Graham Brown also got himself around that corner in a fairly nice position.
Greg Henderson coming off. He's a Kiwi, and he's coming off the World Track Championships where he crashed in the scratch race, I think it was, and he's recovering back on the road event now. This is his first big road outing. You never know how the body's going to react, from the small velodromes to the cobblestones of the Kemmel. But these riders at the front now, you'll see the daylight start to open as we get nearer the back of the pack.
Just looking to see if anybody's missed out and found themselves a little bit too far back. There's Laszlo Bodrogi, Peter van Petegem, Robbie McEwen, a little bit too far down for the moment, but Robbie, I think, probably today banking on the fact that he feels that this race with the weather conditions will probably all pretty much come back together.
Well, Tom Boonen still doesn't look to me as though he's firing like he would normally do. He's gone up there in 4th place, but working very hard. Fletcher, the big danger man. Stuart O'Grady getting through on the inside, trying to make sure he's in the split should it happen. But you know, they're coming up in pretty regular fashion here. There's no huge gaps.
Van Petegem just going through there. He's a long way down.
McEwen.
Yeah. Robbie, I think, probably just banking on the fact that he doesn't want to use any energy at all, and just playing that little waiting game to see whether or not it's going to be a large group come down to the finish. It isn't normally, but a lot of guys today, Phil, at the start were predicting a group of 50 or 60 riders coming together for the finish.
Well, if that's the case, then we're going to be treated to a wonderful sprint finish, because the finish in Wevelgem is on a dead straight road. It really is a sprinter's delight. You've got to get it right, otherwise somebody will beat you to the line. Here's the descent starting again. Nobody taking any risks at all here. Boonen's gone down in 4th place. Fletcher's there as well.
O'Grady going through there.
Right up. He's climbed well towards the end of that climb. Matthew Hammond going through.
Faces of these guys. Yeah. There's Julian Dean, the national champion in New Zealand. There's one bottle less. Thank you very much. That's always dangerous. Van Petegem there in the dark blue.
Just look at the bottles coming out now.
That's hard.
That was a very nasty fall, and he's really hurt his face, that rider.
This is the mayhem now, because once the crashes start, you hear the noise, and a number of other riders there have started to touch their brakes, and it's actually, Phil, it is impossible to control on a descent like this. But that rider went down very hard.
Well,
but it was the ricochet further back.
I think that his chain or chain wheel gouged his face there, Paul, and they'll need to get the doctor to him as soon as they can. That's very, very sad indeed. I didn't see who it was. It's a Unibet.com rider. We may be able to see it again here, but it's because of the bottles bouncing, and then that rider fell rather heavily.
Well, you see the rider in front of him actually had to negotiate around one of those bottles, and he tried to maneuver, tried to change a fraction, and you cannot change on a descent like this. The doctors were immediately there, and I think you might have noticed that almost immediately on site, on the side of the road there was medical help and medical assistance, and there's a rider gone down here from Team CSC as well. And I'm wondering if that isn't Cancellara.
Well, it's looking like Cancellara to me. Or the Gerolsteiner rider who has gone down there. That is Heinrich Hausler yet again. We saw him crash just moments ago. Well, this is the descent we were telling you about. Wilfred Kretschkins is in the grass here.
I think it might have been Luke Roberts, actually, who went down from Team CSC, but I didn't get a very good look at him.
Well, Kretschkins has gone. He's had a win this year already in the Tour of Qatar.
Oh, this has been absolute mayhem.
This was a real shame.
This is in
I
the
know
dry,
we preempted it a little bit because it is such a dangerous extent. Once those bottles start jumping off the bikes, if a rider catches one of those, then you have a bad fall. Because the sadness is that there's nowhere to slide on the cobblestones. It's such a steep. Tyler Farrer is down there as well.
Yep, he's gone down. That's him at the side. That's not him at the side of the road because he rides for Cofidis. But this is a rider from Predictor-Lotto who's gone down.
It's the leader. It's Wim de Vocht.
Wim de Vocht. I tell you, that's all it takes. That's such a dangerous descent here, the descent of the Camel, that you're basically just holding on to your bike, hoping that it's going to stay in a straight line. Your eyes are actually bouncing up and down in your head. There's Tyler Farrer. He's really banged his knee up quite a bit there. It doesn't look all that bad to me, but as I say, the doctors are being kept very busy indeed here this afternoon. And let's not forget, they're going to have to get the ambulance. The other thing about the Kemmelberg, Phil, is the cars actually don't follow around here either. So the race doctor probably was taken out on the deviation.
Well, this rider here, and I'm afraid I can't recognize him just at the moment, but let's hope he's okay. It may all prove to be just superficial cuts once they clean him up a little bit. He was the worst injured with a rather bad fall because the bike landed on top of him at one stage. I think it went across his face.
Well, that was pretty dramatic, and that's what can always happen on a descent like the Kemmel, which is such a crazy descent. And we're staying down here for the moment. Meanwhile, the race is continuing up front with probably the majority of the riders not even knowing about this because this accident happened a long way down. Have a look at it again. There's Tony Cruz on the front getting round there nice and safely. You see that bottle jumps out there, and a couple of riders there are starting to panic. The liquid gas rider managed to control it, and then this guy went straight down over the top of the handlebars and onto his face, and the ricochet effect going further back down in the main field. And I tell you what, the one thing, there'll be one or two riders there were pretty scared about that.
I actually am thinking, Paul, it might be Jimmy Casper, who was the leader of the Unibet.com team. I thought that was the number on the bike that went through our picture. And looking at his face, it could be, but I think his lips have rather swelled up with that nasty crash.
There's the ambulance.
Anyway, the ambulance is with him now, so let's hope they'll get him off to hospital pretty quickly and be able to sort him out. Our cameras are going to have to find where the race has gone now as we continue to search the rear of the peloton. Now, these riders here have called it a day. They're now looking for the signs which say Wevelgem, as Claudio Corioni, the rider at the back of the two Lamprey boys. They had a very happy Sunday, of course. They provided the winner in Alessandro Balan in the Tour of Flanders, who's not here today. They've kept him fresh, hopefully, for next weekend. Meanwhile, we're rejoining the front of the peloton. The gap is at 3 minutes 26, continues to come down. The peloton, I think, has probably had a little bit of the stuffing knocked out of them here, and they're now going to regroup and reassess and see just who is around, because there's no racing being done at the front.
Well, what they will know, and because of the two-way radios that the riders carry on board now, they will all know, they will have all been informed by their team managers that there has been an accident, and they'll all be wondering which one of their teammates was involved in there. Robbie McEwen, though, was not involved in that accident at all, because they just caught sight of Robbie McEwen in about 5th or 6th position.
Yes, well, McEwen is an uncanny rider who can read a race. He always is in the right place when it matters. As now the riders decided it's time to start racing again, and this is quite a select little group you see now at the front. It's the sort of group we expect to get clear on the Kemmelberg, and normally then they race for the next lap, split it up again, and then they get down towards the finish. There's about 50 riders here just now.
Well, Laszlo Bordogi is there. He's the rider in 5th position there with the red shirt of champion of Hungary. A lot of these riders, I think, obviously will be shaken a bit, Phil, but some of them might not even know yet that there's been an accident, because that accident happened pretty much halfway down the main field.
There must have been about 8 riders that we could see had fallen there. And the sad thing is, if you do fall on the descent of the Kemmel, your injuries are usually race-ending injuries. You don't normally get back up. About 4 to 5 years ago, there were 6 riders crashed on that descent. All 6 went to hospital.
Yeah, but on that occasion, that was in the rain and wet
yes,
conditions.
It was.
Unfortunately, today, it was actually probably the most ideal descent you could have off the Kemmelberg. But unfortunately, it's that problem with guys not looking after their bottles and keeping their bottle cages nice and squeezed up. That's something in the old days when the bottle cages were made of steel. You could actually exaggerate that a lot by forcing the bottle cage in and really having the bottle locked in there. But with these lighter materials that they're using these days, that doesn't hold the bottle in quite so well.
Peloton's regrouping here. Just a little group off the front. They'll chase them down if they can. 3 minutes 11 to the real breakaway. at the 50 kilometers to go point now. 100 rather, and 57 kilometers has been covered. We're back into the Clyde for the second time through as we continue on to the second lap now, and then the run down towards the finish in Wevelgem. No further updates on the carnage we've left behind on the Kemmelberg, but it looks as though the rider we think was Jimmy Casper, Unibet.com, I'm sure is now on his way to hospital. This is Laszlo Bodrogi, as Paul has said, the champion of Hungary in the red, white and green colours. Kopp van der Wedstrijd is the leader of the race. There they are on the left, and the peloton is the pack. And they're almost coming together on the right there now.
Yeah, they'll all come back together a fraction. I think we'll see a strange race for the next few kilometres as the guys in the main field try to figure out just exactly what happened behind. Many of them will obviously be a bit upset as well by the accidents that their teammates may have been involved in. The main field have allowed 8 or 9 riders to slip off the front, but they need to get this organised pretty quickly if they want to pull it back together and reorganise. But most of the big names managed to get themselves through there quite safely.
Well, we're going back to the mountain here.
Kretschens.
This is Wilfried Kretschens, who crashed. As I said, he had a great start of the season with a win in the Tour Qatar. Looks a little bit pained here, but other than that, okay. As they take him back, he's probably walloped those cobblestones.
Well, the thing is about the Kemmel, the descent, is it's so straight and so rough. If you come down, if you have any change of direction or any change of trajectory, it's almost impossible to control the machine. And once an accident happens in front, you get the catapulting effect right the way down through the main field when riders react sometimes too violently to a noise that they can hear in front of them.
Well, Bodrogi here is really hurting the riders trying to get on terms with him, and he looks quite passive about it all, but they're all struggling to reach him. And slowly but surely they're doing just that as we go inside the 50 kilometers to go and inside the 3-minute gap now to the trio up front, who might yet stay away at least for the next climb of the Kemmel, and that's probably the safest place. But I can't see them defending less than 3 minutes when they run off the Kemmel and down into Wevelgem. Here we are looking at the flashback again to the situation out on the climb. There was Kretschens. Sadly enough, don't know who this rider is from the Landbau Crédit team. But that was Wim de Vox there, and we think this might well be Jimmy Casper here.
I think you're pretty much right. And he put his hand up there. And I remember he was involved in a television, an IMAX movie called Wired to Win. And he was involved in the Tour de France that year when they were following the event. And he had a nasty crash on stage 1, and he actually wanted to put his hand up like that to show his family that he was okay.
Yeah.
Strange that he made that same gesture. This is Oscar Freire. Now, this is rather interesting because this is quite a nice little group here looking back there, and Oscar Freire may well have just created a little bit of a surprise because in the chaos that's going on, maybe a lot of the main contenders don't realize that Freire has slipped into this group.
Little gap they've got as well here, and Bodrogi is the man who pulled it away. A little bit close there with our camera, but we'll get away from him as he doesn't seem at all concerned. The champion of Hungary, he's being the strong man here right now. Now he wants a little help, little flick of the arm, calling the rider behind to the arms at the front.
Well, there's the chaos again at the back end of the main field. Please don't ride there because that's definitely the most dangerous place to be. As you can see, the best place to ride is right up here at the front. There's less chaos, there's less chance of an accident. But those riders now are getting themselves pretty much organized, and with the presence there, Phil, of Oscar Freire, that is looking like quite a serious little move.
2:52 is the gap to the leaders, but we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, about 8 riders. This is Casper now, who's now being taken away from the Kemmel, sadly on a stretcher. Winner of a stage of the Tour de France last year, indicating perhaps he may have a broken tooth there as well, but let's hope he's okay.
Well, Freire has seen this as a great opportunity. He's come straight to the front, looks over his shoulder, wants a bit of help from Laszlo Bodrogi. And now these guys, Phil, will start to get quite excited. Scar is in here from Switzerland. Guédon is in here as well. It says Guédon, but I actually can't see Guédon.
Pozzato here as well.
Pippo Pozzato, Liquidias, Christian Nies, and Oscar Freire are probably the most dangerous number slipping into this group. Just looking, that doesn't look to me as if that is Frédéric Guédon. Actually, it may well be. Pozzato there in the lime green. It is Guédon. This is an interesting move. The winner of Paris Tours last year going through in the white. And they won't get any help here at all, Phil, from the rider from Quick-Step. I think Quick-Step looking for a performance here this afternoon, and the man who's got himself in here for Quick-Step is Kevin Van Impe. One of the teammates, he was actually the rider who rode away from the signing in with Tom Boonen, who turned up a little bit late for the sign-in this morning, I think to try and avoid having to sign too many autographs or do any television interviews.
Yeah, that's often the way with Tom. He comes very late to sign in, so the crowd can't delay him, and he missed the start of the race, but he was quickly in the swing of things. 3, 6, 7 riders, 8 riders, and the peloton reacting quickly now. I think they've already assessed if you've got Filippo Pozzato and Oscar Freire in the move, then you've really got to get after them, because if they get a gap, you won't be seeing them again today. And the peloton shutting them down in West Outer, which is where we start the series of small climbs, taking us back now to the Kemmelberg. And it looks as though more or less together, but it's going to hurt the riders, this. It's a good chase to bring them back, and it might reshuffle the pack at the front for the next climb of the Kemmelberg.
You just see the one rider just at the bottom on the right hand side there. He'd just popped. He'd done his job at the front, trying to nail this group back for his teammates. And this might be a good time for somebody to try and make a move over the top, because after everybody was on the rivet, then it'll all start to slow down, and somebody seems to be taking that piece of advice there and looking for a move, and it's one of the riders from Skill. It's Fletcher covering him, Stuart O'Grady covering him too. They were waiting for that. You see, very canny bike rider, Stuart O'Grady, just waiting for that counter move. He knew it was going to happen. There's the Kopp van der Weegstride. They're actually on exactly the same climb now. These riders taking this left-hand turn at the top of the Verdijnberg, or the Mont Noir as I call it, while the main field is just starting the climb. So that gap is down pretty consistently down now to 2.5 minutes.
But they're holding it just now, and they're not far off finishing the circuit. Once they're over the Kemmel, they'll turn to the right rather than the left and head towards home. And they look pretty strong. They've got to keep something back, obviously, in the hope that the gap stays a little bit. But the peloton are becoming a little preoccupied here. Just having a little chat at the back is Graham Brown, the Aussie sprinter. Well, he's been keeping himself out of trouble all day. Let's hope it stays that way, as others have been falling off. This isn't the best place to be right now, but he's obviously got a bicycle problem.
Trying to see what it is.
Something with his shoe by the look of it. Maybe his shoe
He's
snapped.
broken the buckle on his shoe. Now
Well,
that's bad luck.
That
is bad luck.
A huge handicap for a sprinter now, and they're going to lash his foot onto the pedal. Well, no, not on the pedal. No, it's split on the side, isn't it? Strap.
The small clip just on the top there, which is a little bit like a ski binding clip, has obviously popped open, and he's having to repair that on the move. Now that is going to be a serious handicap for him later on.
Well, let's hope not. They might do a good job and lash it on. Here's a good move now, and this is going to start the reaction. This is a short, sharp climb, this one. Actually, it's a little bit more than a short climb. It's quite a drag to start with, isn't it?
It's about 1.5 kilometers. This is David Kopp. He was second in this event last year, taking a very clean pair of wheels just ahead of Alessandro Patacchi, but behind Thor Hushovd.
Well, he's decided this is the moment to make a move here, and he's going to keep it going. David is a rider who had a very bad crash in Milan-San Remo, which kept him out, but he's back now, and he's getting back into the swing of things. He could do with some help. He'll wait for this rider, Mastana, and then they'll get together. David was taken into the original team of Deutsche Telekom alongside Jan Ullrich, but he found he wasn't going to make any progress in his own right working for Jan Ullrich, so he moved away, and now he's the team leader here of Gerolsteiner, and he's a good rider. But he's got help at hand, 2 of them clear, and that huge effort by David Kopp has opened up quite a gap, and the peloton don't seem to be that interested.
Well, I think they're getting themselves ready now. For them, the next mental move is going to be the final ascent of the Kemmel. And they know that if you make an acceleration like that on the Black Mountain, you've got to try and recuperate a fraction before you go over the next climb of the day, which is the Red Mountain. And they're just cruising here, the main field, as they come up. But I think we'll start to see, again, Phil, a serious organisation as we come to the Kemmel the next time. And maybe 1 or 2 riders taking it just a little bit more careful going down.
Well, the rider of Mastana is Dmitry Murevyev, who's joined him at the front.
Well, they're getting themselves organised. They've opened up a gap of about 15 to 20 seconds. They're looking at bridging a gap of 2 minutes and 10 seconds to the 3 leaders, and we're now getting towards the final run-in towards the finish at 43 kilometres to go. That's about 26 miles of racing, and we're probably not much more than an hour from the finish Once again, the main field slowing down and compacting up into that very closely knit group of riders up at the front end. But again, Phil, I have to say there have been an awful lot of crashes on today's race, and it's almost certainly because the weather is too good.
Too good, no wind, riders taking chances. I think the crash coming down the mountain was probably a mistake, but it wasn't really caused by them taking chances just then. That's a shame. But anyway, they're all getting together. See that parked car? Those riders going through on the inside, trying to get repositioned. Well, Muriev, who's got into that group, he's not a bad bike rider, and he had a great ride in Flanders, so he's going to be very confident. He finished 8th in the Tour de Flanders, which is a terrific result for him. But he is a man for the classics. He's been 3 times champion of his country, twice as a time trial champion, once as road race. He's a Kazakh.
Well, McEwen just moving to the front there, so he's obviously thinking about getting himself safely over to Kemmelberg the next time. As you can see the little bit of chaos and disorganization at the back. This is the moment in the race when a lot of the riders will be going back to get drinks. Paolo Forniciari, he I think is looking for the team car to take on board drinks for the rest of the squad.
Not too happy with the cameraman who's blocking his approach, I think, as somebody on the right from Skill has also got himself a problem there, and I think it's Jin Long, one of the Japanese riders on that team, who is now pulled over to the right. And this rider here, just riding along, is Peter Gillebert.
Yeah, he had a pretty good ride at the weekend as well in the Tour of Flanders. Now you can see the movement. There's a lot of movement in that peloton here this afternoon. You can see riders moving up there on the right-hand side, and it's almost like a still here, with riders moving up through the outside and then getting sucked back down through the middle, and it's a constant movement all of the time as everybody tries to stay and hold their position in the top 10 or 15 places. But today I think everyone is very nervous. They'll be a lot more nervous next time they come to the Camel, because by now, Phil, they will have heard all of the information. And this is a Forniciari, a little bit of the Italian temperament there, not too happy.
Well, he's coming up a hill, he won't be too happy with that pressure. And there is the punctured rider from Skill, Shimano. And here is the head of the charging peloton now at 2:29. So those 2 riders are showing quite a little bit of defiance just now. There is Kopp and Muravyev.
They've got a good lead there. I'm estimating that to be around about 20 seconds. But what will happen now, you see, they'll start to get themselves organized in this peloton. They'll whip up the pacemaking to set up a good long line once they get to the Monteberg, and then try and get round the corner of the Kemmel again. And I think we'll see Kopp get pulled back into the fold because of the general acceleration in this peloton.
Well, this is the second climb up is often the decisive one. The winning break can leave on the climb at this point, although one gets the feeling today it may not. No wind to split the field up. Unibet.com, who've lost Jimmy Casper, one big sprinter, has still got Baden Cooke at the front here. And again, I think he's decided he wanted that drink on the other side of the road. Well spotted.
Well, looks like Philippe Gilbert, the local boy, and he knew, well, it wasn't much of a drink, was he?
Yep.
Took a lot of risks to get that bottle and then got rid of it.
Wrong flavour, I would think.
Yeah, he was looking for something, probably a strawberry flavour, and he ended up getting only raspberry. Loker, and the riders making their way through Loker now, and you can see they getting themselves stretched out into a slightly thinner line at the front. That's an indication of the acceleration.
This is still Kretschkins here. We're still at the scene on the mountain. As the riders are approaching this mountain, they'll be here in probably 10 minutes or so.
Let's hope they get the ambulance away from there by then. Get the road clear and safe for these riders, who will be thinking then that this is the crucial part of the race. There's Stuart O'Grady with the red shoulders and the white jersey, Team CSC. Looking very attentive and concentrated. His compatriot Robbie McEwen, Phil, also very attentive on the other side of the road.
Yes, Australian professional cycling is on a high these days. They've got some terrific cyclists, and most of them are in this race today, actually, as we look here at David Kopp and Muravyev. 2 strong riders together, and showing us that they're riding pretty well here. Their first ambition will be to get to the Kemmelberg without the company of this lot down at the bottom of the picture. But they are moving quite quickly now. At 2:16 is the gap. They're not closing that gap as fast as they were earlier, that's for sure. But we'll see.
Well, there's no real organisation, there's no real chase. The green jersey in the middle there, that is Stefan Weissermann. Tom Bonen's just over there. See how crouched down he is behind his teammate, and he's getting himself right up at the front end of the main field. There on the far side there is a man that one or two riders have thought is going to be rather good for Team Discovery Channel, and that is that's Thomas Veitkus. I don't know if you just caught a glimpse of him. In fact, somebody gave me his name today as a tip to win this race.
Yep.
He's got a great sprint.
If they can get him to the finish line in a group, they reckon he might produce the finish that will give them the victory on Team Discovery Channel. That's the plan. Tony Cruz is the man who revealed that to us, and he's right in the centre of our picture behind those riders in the blue jersey just now. So he's also defending a good position. His wife's flown in from Long Beach, California as well, and she apparently loves this race to watch. She's on the Kemmelberg, and so she's going to see her husband come up near the front runners, I think, today, because he's holding position well. These two riders at 40 kilometers to go, inside an hour of racing left. They've got a bridge across to those three. We don't see very much of the three leaders, but they're holding on to that 2-minute lead. Continues to drop ever so slowly, but it continues to come down, which is not good news for the breakaway. They've got to stick at it and just see what they can do now. Well, they'll make the Kemmel at least.
Well, I think this is the lull before the storm in the main field as well, Phil. They know right now they're setting themselves up for the final ascent of the Kemmel, which is why when we get over the next kilometre or so, I think we'll start to see that main field begin to stretch out and get itself organised. These two guys, they're not concerned about them at all. They're more concerned about the three riders in front. And these guys, they're just leaving them to probably get reeled in under their own weakness as they've stayed out just a little bit too long.
Well, Dmitry Muryev took a look over his shoulder there and he saw them all, so he knows the catch is nigh, but on the other hand, they might want to try and hold off. In fact, David Kopp certainly wants to hold it off until he gets to the top of the Kemmel at least. And I think that's a good decision. If he can get up the Kemmelberg, then he's in a position to move forward with the strong riders who might join him. Anyway, he's going to keep up the pressure. It looks as though Muryev isn't feeling quite as playful as he sort of loses the gap here on Kopp.
This is a good gamble by David Kopp, because what he's trying to do is in fact get himself to that corner onto the Kemmelberg before the chaos at the front end of the main field. He'd made the effort to get off the front of the peloton, and he wants to conserve that. If he can afterwards, he can then just ride up the Kemmelberg at his own pace. But those guys in the peloton now look like a bunch of dedicated athletes waiting to pounce and waiting to ascend the Kemmel with a little bit more aggression than last time. Last time they pretty much just rode steadily over the Kemmelberg. This time, Phil, I think we may well see a slightly different approach.
Well, that peloton from the helicopter there has halved in size since the first ascent of the Kemmelberg. Probably 50, 60 riders left down there at the moment, and you can bet it might even halve again this time up the climb. A gap is beginning to come down quite quickly now as they pick up Dmitry Muryev. Minute 40. 39 to go. Next stop, the Kemmelberg.
There's a pair of green shorts over to the left-hand side of Crédit Agricole. I wonder if that's Thor Hushovd moving up to the front end of the main field. You can see Stuart O'Grady's style just over there on the left-hand side as well of Team CSC. O'Grady's being attentive. He now knows it's important, because this time over the Kemmel, we may well see a move. Tom Boonen riding up at the front. He's taking this race very seriously. I think he may well be looking for the win here this afternoon, just to put a bit of morale back into the troop, because they feel as if they didn't do a great Ronde van Vlaanderen. Although I thought, considering his injuries, I thought Boonen right in the middle there with the World Championship bands on his sleeves there, Phil, I thought he made a fairly good effort on the Mur de Grammont.
I think he did. He just didn't have the final punch, that was all. He certainly looks quite cool just at the minute as he looked around. Matthew Heyman, also the Commonwealth Games road race champion, also getting himself to the front. Here we come now, the turn onto the Kemmel for the second and final time, and these three guys are still clear. Well, when they turned onto it last time, they had a lead of 4 minutes and 15 seconds. That's now down to just 2 minutes.
Yeah, they're looking a little bit more laboured this time as well. It's Mengin on the front, followed by Burghardt. Roger Hammond just sitting at the back here. Only 530 meters of cobblestones, but the problem is they're slightly uphill and very steep at 18% when you get to the top. Just as a matter of interest, by the way, the descent on the other side of the Kemmelberg is 23%, and that's rather a steep little incline.
It is. I've been down it, and believe me, you just close your eyes and you're frightened to death until you run off those cobblestones and you can regain control of your bicycle. It's and if it were raining, then it is terrible. But anyway, these are the three boys who were well clear on the previous climb. They're still clear, and it still looks good, because that time check of 1:40 is to David Kopp, and it's 2:02 to the peloton. And there they come. Look, a massive crowd here. They're treated on the top, by the way. They usually put a television screen up. And there's a change. It's probably Philippe Gilbert has a problem here. Most likely man, Frédéric Guédon.
Guédon, I think, was the man who had the problem there. That's Guédon.
Oh, no, there's Gilbert there. For some reason, pulling off. Now, as he had the message that his teammates probably are going to chase, they're going to give him a hand.
In which case, it's Guédon who's actually passed the wheel across to him, I would think. This is the front of the race, and Roger Hammond. I'll give a photo finish to that one. You call that, Phil.
Well, he just had a little smile there to Mengin. He had a bit of a sprint to the yellow line, which is the official summit. Smiled at Mengin. But, you know, with a lead of 2:01 now and about 37 kilometres to go, they've really got to put their backs into this and hope that the field behind get a little bit affected by other things.
Yeah, well, you can see the one or two riders got tailed off there. There's the corner into the start of the Kemmelberg, and nearly everybody has got around that nice and safely. And Stefan Wesserman is the man who leads them this time.
First man onto the climb, Wesserman. Where's Tom Bonen for the moment? This is a whole new group of riders at the front now as they start to really try to rip. And Robbie McEwen may have been at the back earlier on, but he's just about 4 riders back this time up. Now, if McEwen knows if he can get over the top in the front group and the group pick up those 3 leaders, then the odds on him winning would be possibly as high as 90%. Here come the bottles, but they're from the 3 leaders, at least at the moment.
Well, that's Kopp now just about to get picked up by the front end of the main field, and that's why he did that. That's Ventoso from Saunier Duval riding through there. There's Tom Bonen over on the left-hand side. I think riding just fairly comfortably. McEwen looking very comfortable right in the front end of that group.
He'll be feeling very confident with his ride up the climb just here. Julian Dean's gone through. Champion of New Zealand.
Tell you what, there's not a lot of aggression in the main field. I think you could be right, Phil. We could be looking at a very large group. They're trying, in fact, I think, to keep the main field pretty much together to see whether or not they can have a large number of teammates over the top of this climb to organise the chase to pull back those leaders.
Well, this is the top of the climb. Tom Bonen coming up. Everybody in control of things. Robbie McEwen, small as he is, bouncing his way through the cobbles. Now it's the false flat through the trees, then the plunge off the Kemmelberg. And then it's going to be all hands to the deck to chase down the leading 3 riders. And they've got themselves 36 kilometres to do it.
They'll have to get organised. There's a lot of riders in this group from Team Quickstep, a lot of riders from Team Rabobank, so they may well get themselves organised to try and chase. So this is still, Phil, a very big main field. And I think if it hadn't been for that accident on the previous lap over the Kemmelberg, we may well have seen an even larger peloton.
Nico Eekhout, champion of Belgium, not quite where he was earlier, but he's still with that group here. They come on the descent now. These are the first 3 being chased by a rider from Unibet.com there.
Boonen leading them down himself now. He's just a few seconds off the back, but it's always a good position to be in because you have control of what's in front of you. You have control of your own speed. You all,
and there's another crash, and that's it again. Well, this is amazing. I can't believe this. A whole ricochet of effect here. And this is Art Vierhouten, who's sitting down just in front of our camera. A massive pile-up again. And it was all a ricochet effect of riders braking when they saw the first rider fall.
I think Matty Hammond went down there as well. I saw a very large rider from Rabobank going off to the right-hand side of the road or the left-hand side of the screen. And the problem here, Phil, has obviously been caused by these bottles bouncing out. And I've never seen so many bottles bounce out of the cages. And it must be the fact that they're just not strong enough to hold bottles in situ in a case like this.
And the last one did open up, and of course it made the cobbles slippery because the water came out all over the place. And you see, the trouble is, it doesn't appear very steep on the cameras, but it is about 20 to 25% this descent. And the riders can't change direction once the falls start.
No, you're committed.
There's nothing they can do except brake and go down. And you see, they all fall individually. There's nobody touches anybody. They just can't do anything about the fall. The rider near his camera there was James van Landschoot. And I think that is Matty Hammond, who's come down with a bit of a thump, but looks okay. But of course, they're always frightened they're going to get hit by somebody just behind.
That's the big fear as well, because they know that on a descent like this, there is absolutely no chance at all, Phil, of actually controlling. And again, it's absolute mayhem, this descent here, and they may well have to question in the future whether or not they continue to use this descent.
Well, Matty Wilson's also gone down there, which is a great shame. This is Fabio Sacchi, rider well known in Australia when he used to race in the Tour Down Under on Team Saeco. He always rode pretty well in that Tour Down Under in Australia. And again, as the cameramen try to get the pictures. We'll try and find our way through, but this is a great shame. I think this is Matty Heyman here, and the other Australian, Matty Wilson, has also come down for Unibet. That's not Matty Heyman.
No, I don't think it is.
It's another rider from Rabobank, and it is in fact it is Matty Heyman.
Yeah,
Just at the angle of the camera there. Yes, it is. He looks okay anyway. He did manage to slide. Very few people slide on cobblestone.
He bounced and jumped up pretty rapidly. And
well, deja vu. I can't believe we're seeing this on the second time down. It's never happened before. I can assure you that I can recall.
Well, I tell you what, the
multiple
problem was
pile up like that.
The problem was caused by the bottles and just a little bit of panic. And you cannot touch your brakes. If you put your brakes on just a little bit too tightly, then you lose complete and utter control of the machine. And that's exactly what happened. Then the guys behind then hear the noise, hear the crash, and they start to panic a little bit because they also want to try and make a maneuver to avoid what's in front of them. And you just can't. You just have to hope for luck in a case like that.
Well, our camera's delayed back with the crash scene yet again. Our helicopter is now searching for the Gent Wevelgem cycle race as we leave the town of Kemmel, from which the Kemmelberg takes its name. And we've got one lone rider, well, a couple of riders down there, but I'm not exactly sure who or where they are.
I think these are pretty much riders who've probably abandoned the race, and the helicopter's going to have a hard time trying to find out what exactly is going on. There's a second group at 1 minute and 14 seconds, and I presume that will be the fairly big group with most of the leaders like Tom Bowden in it, then the front end of the main field at 1 minute 35. And well, no, it isn't. In fact, that small group of riders we saw leading over to Kemmel have managed to get themselves a bit of an advantage, and the T-Mobile rider there wants to sit up and wait for the group.
Well, these are riders, they're saying Alessandro Patacchi. It looks like it might have been going the other way.
Patacchi has a fear of Belgium. It was in Belgium, although be it the start of the Giro d'Italia last year, that he actually crashed out and broke his kneecap and never actually got back to Italy. So it is Ventoso here in the yellow jersey on the front and Burghardt in the pink jersey of T-Mobile. But I think Burghardt, Phil, would actually rather be in the main field because he realizes it's still a fairly long ride down towards the finish with 33 kilometers to go. But Ventoso, in good form, as you said earlier, was very dominant in the Castillo Leon, and he feels that this is probably the move to make on a day where there's been a complete and utter anarchic descent of the Kemmelberg on 2 occasions.
Marcus Burghardt there, the big man, just talking on his radio to the team management, which will be in the following cars, as to whether to progress this breakaway or what to do. He wants to know what's happened behind. They've got 2 organised riders there. There's 2 more, 3 more coming up, and what will be the sharp end of the race. It's not the full peloton yet, although it's well spread.
Looks like Gilbert trying to come across there in the Française des Jeux colours, but getting across the gap there, the big figure in the blue jersey was Tom Boonen. Main field trying to scramble their way back into contention as well. But this is a move here by Gilbert, I would expect, to try and get himself off the front.
Predictor-Lotto rider with him, one of Robin McEwen's teammates, who may not want to help him here, but there's certainly Gilbert, who won the Hepvolt Classic last year. He rides well in Belgium, in Flanders. He is a Walloon. He comes from the French-speaking area of the country, and they don't normally ride quite so well in the Flanders area.
9 riders in that group. Tom Boonen was in there. Rabobank had made themselves represented in that leading group as well, but the main field, as you can see, is pretty much stretched out into a long line.
Well, that long, thin line of the peloton, trying to repair the damage. This is a typical situation after the Kemmelberg. And if they can bring it back to Oscar Freire is very attentive now. Again, if Freire comes down to the finish day, it could be likely his victory in this race.
This is a big scramble. I didn't expect it to split like this. Boonen looking across at Gilbert and saying, come on, mate, let's get ourselves organised, because this is not a bad move here. If we can get a small workman-like group together, we've got a good chance here of getting rid of a large number of the big sprinters, because there are a large number of sprinters in Gent Wevelgem here this afternoon. Boonen is a big hulk of a man, isn't he? When he gets out of the saddle, you can almost feel the power that's going down through those pedals and into his machine.
And he's driving too. He's really hurting himself here. So they are right on the top end of the reserves here, trying to form this breakaway. Trying to break the elastic, but the pack is reforming. There's 2 packs coming together here, and then they're going to have to concentrate. But there's a good mix of teams at the front. There'll be nobody reacting if they've got teammates in that little move, and Rabobank and Quickstep, Freire and Boonen. There's 2 strong teams to block at the back, and O'Grady also again has read the right move, I think, here.
That's
And Robbie McEwen. Now, this is the leading group, so McEwen has read this one, and he will go head-to-head with the likes of Tom Bonen and Oscar Freire in a sprint finish. This, I would think, is the shape, but, you know, they haven't given up at all behind as they're trying now to bridge the gap. And sadly, we are back up the mountain here. This is James van Lanschot of Landbouw Credit, who is the next man lining up for the hospital. This is really sad.
Well, it's been a devastating day for a lot of these riders here this afternoon. But this, Phil, is a pretty serious move. You can see all the guys who are very keen and very interested, because O'Grady, McEwen, all the big names have got into this group. The red jersey there is the champion of Switzerland. That's Gregory Rast for Team Astana. And I don't think anybody expected the big names to try and hit them quite so hard. It's still going to be a scramble, and they have definitely not yet opened the gap.
No, and it's hurting the peloton too, because there's no cars behind that peloton. They're trapped by the double split. And this is a very hard-working group. It's going to be a hot pursuit across fairly flat countryside now, with no wind to assist or hinder. That's Burghardt looking over to see who's made the group here with him.
Well, they're counting up. They're counting a lot of big names there, because a lot of the big names have made the contact to this group as we come around this corner. That's Rast in second position, Boonen sitting a little bit further back now in the dark blue, and I think Nick Noyens is the rider who's got himself in here for Cofidis.
Well, they've lost a lot of teammates on the two descents of the Kemmelberg today. But you're right, Gregory Rast and Robbie McEwen knows a good move when he's in one, and he's now prepared to commit himself here as we briefly go up towards the Stein de Volder. Now, I'm not sure where Stein de Volder is, whether they're behind that chase group or just ahead of it.
Well, I have to tell you, I've got absolutely no idea either. I think he's probably been caught out in nowhere land.
Yeah.
I think the race motorbike is just moving forward. This is the second group on the road, and just having a look to see what the gap is. It's still not very much at all, but I've seen Gent Wevelgems in the past when the gap has stayed like that from here all the way down to the finish line.
Just look at that.
There is another group a little bit further back. These groups are only separated by about 15 seconds each. There's not a big organization on the front end of that group, and the guys in that counter move, which is going with all the big names, really have got to keep the hammer down for another 10 kilometers or so.
There's 16 riders in that very elite chase group, and despite the talent that's in that breakaway, I've got a feeling they're going to lasso it and bring it back. There, the peloton is getting bigger. There are the 16 riders, you see. They're going nowhere at the moment, yet they've got Oscar Freire, Tom Bonen, Robbie McEwen, Stuart O'Grady in that group, and it's still not going to leave this very determined pack behind. We're looking at 51 seconds now, the breakaway to the second group on the road, which we presume is the group at the top of our picture.
Well, there's only 8 seconds, and in fact it's gone down from that, between that group there, which contains the likes of Robbie McEwen and Stuart O'Grady, to the front end of the third group on the road, and another 15 seconds further back, another very large group. You know, the riders at the start, Phil, could be very right in their prediction that this was going to be a 50 or 60 man lead group coming into town.
I think it's going to be all of that if they bring this little group back together again now. It's still a gap there, and because they're all committed, that is not necessarily a closable gap just now. They're really at the top level of the chase, and it's going to be a very painful piece of gap closing, whatever happens.
Well, it's going to be meter by meter, because that group of 16 riders that we're looking at have certainly not given up at all. What they will have to do is just keep the pressure on, and hopefully that gap would decrease every meter. But you can see it's having a serious effect on the front end of the group. Everybody at the moment is under pressure just to try and bring this race together. It's a small group of riders come across, I think, in the next 20 or 30 meters, and Oscar Freire says, no, I'm going.
Freire launches yet another attack here. Ventoso grimaces at the back. He can't do anything but follow him, but he follows him, and he goes over the top just about. Through the S's here, and look at the gap has opened again, but I would think about 8 or 9 riders, maybe a bit more, have joined that leading group of 16 now, and this split might work, Paul. That second peloton may not bridge.
Well, what happened there was it was the strong guys at the front end of that group who actually bridged the gap. Now, if the man in front, or the man halfway down who cracked, has left the gap, that's an indication that the rest of the riders in that group are also a little bit under pressure. So if Oscar Freire and a couple more riders in that group now decide to keep the hammer down for another 4 or 5 kilometers, we may well see the formation of a group.
Well, fine riding by Oscar Freire. He's a huge talent. No Spanish cyclist has ever won Gent Wevelgem. Best place is second by Juan Antonio Fletcher, who's in here today as well and rides on the same team as Oscar Freire. I've just got a feeling that these boys got as close as they're going to get. There's 2 splits here as well.
Well, there's no chase there, you see. There's individual riders on the front of that group riding and keeping the tempo. I think they do need to keep the pressure going in that group, and it may well succeed. And Oscar Freire was joined there by Ventoso, 2 Spanish riders and a T-Mobile rider, which could still have been Burghardt getting onto the back end of that group. And here we get a chance to look at the face of Ventoso. Oscar Freire today. This man, he's a great racer, and by racer I mean a man who can win sprints, he can climb mountains, but here he's actually racing as he's forcing the move here off the front of the group, and he knew that everyone was on the river. He knew that this was an opportunity. He could have sat in the main field and said, okay guys, I'm just going to sit back and wait for the sprint, but he said, no, I want to race this Gent Wevelgem.
Well, fabulous riding, and he's really put his message home here, because look at the gap he's opened. It's taken a lot of pressure off now the chase behind, because they've got 3 riders. Ventoso is hurting, but still managing to hold pace here. Now Burghardt again has got into the move and again is refusing to assist. And I don't think this is a team tactic. I don't think he's got the strength to help out.
Well, the way that Oscar Freire went out there, Phil, I would have to say he doesn't have anything. He's just waiting for the road to level off a fraction. It's a slight uphill incline here that the riders go on until they get to the main road and turn right towards the heart of Wevelgem, and probably Burghardt is just gasping for breath as we speak.
3 riders clear, and they've got into the breakaway by pure show of strength today. We haven't forgotten about the 3 riders up front, but very shortly I think we're going to see 6 riders up front, if that gap indicated of 11 seconds is to be believed, and we should see the 3 leaders from our helicopter pretty shortly.
Problem is you'll have 3 fresh legs and 3 tired legs, or 3 pairs of tired legs, because those guys who are in that breakaway from the 30th kilometre this morning, I think will have a very hard time keeping up with the likes of Oscar Freire. You can see a little bit of organisation coming now. I think Robbie McEwen has sent the word forward. That is a good looking gap there, Phil, as we're trying to encourage. And the reason Burghardt say I'm not going to ride is because he's got a teammate, Roger Hammond, in front. But that's I have to say that's a little bit stupid, because Roger Hammond is pretty much fried.
Yeah, and he's there. He's right there. Look, here's the bridge. And Ventoso's going to ride across, and this is the catch with just 25 kilometres to go. So for 157 kilometres or so, those 3 riders up front have been ahead of the race, but now they're about to get company with just 25 left to ride. And with the power of Oscar Freire coming to this breakaway, they're going to drive on. I just wonder if there's any possibility Hammond and Cooke can hang on here. Burghardt has got no further excuse now, and he started to help.
Well, he's got one excuse. He's a pretty young rider. He's 23 years of age, and he's still got a lot of professionalism to learn. And I think he just didn't want to be seen to be doing the wrong thing and actually chasing down his own teammate. We've now formed an alliance at the front of 6 riders, 2 riders from T-Mobile, but I wonder what Roger Hammond has got in his legs. There you can see the 6 riders. They're looking at around about 12 seconds advantage, but if you look at the smoke coming from that chimney, they're actually now starting to ride into a headwind.
Well, headwind for what it is, but it is... it might deter the chase here, because they're reorganizing in the back group, but they're looking a little bit too sort of routine now, and they might find that these 6 riders begin to move clear. Watch the clock. 15 seconds now. It's already gone up just a little bit. It's only 15 seconds. You can still throw a blanket across the heads of the race here in Gent Wevelgem today. It's been a real scrap as well, and riders having to come out of the carnage of 2 laps of the Kemmel to get into this position. Oscar Freire is riding so well up here now, and he's driving this race on. Now, the 3 boys who have been out front for so long surely can't have a lot left. Freire must be flying the flag with a big F on it right now as favourite if these go down to the finish.
Well, I think what we'll see happen here is Roger Hammond will definitely dig deep, because he'll feel that his teammate has got a chance. But you can see they're actually doing a job of closing down the gap. It was up to 15 seconds, but it's actually now starting to tilt the other way. And there's some big guns in that group who are asking their teammates to go forward and do a bit of the chasing. I know Robbie McEwen will send his Predictor-Lotto riders to the front. Tom Boonen has sent a couple of riders to the front from Team Quickstep as well. So it may well be that this is an unfortunate move here for Oscar Freire, because it's going to be a long, hard chase down towards the finish, but at least he's had the guts to go out and race this event.
Well, he's certainly shown us he's got great form right now. He won Milan San Remo. He's been the world champion 3 times as well. He's won some big races in his career. He's a very temperamental character, though. You're never quite sure whether he's suddenly going to take a little bit of a mental knock and all of a sudden he's lost interest. But at the moment, and the riders always feel, he's possibly the most talented cyclist on the current circuit. And today I think he's shown us evidence of that. 11 seconds the gap. It's no way has this gone clear yet. That is the chase pack. They have pulled away from the main pack, but that itself is reorganizing just off the right of our camera, and he's not out of it yet either.
No, I think we're going to see a regrouping here if the main field continues to show their keenness to keep operating there. You can see the third group on the road just a little bit further back. Even they too have not yet given up. We're only looking at each group being separated by 10 to 12 seconds. I think Oscar Freire will be wondering whether or not this is an ideal situation for him, because he could lose himself an awful lot of energy on the run down towards the finish.
Huge work being done by the peloton now, and T-Mobile, of course, massing in the second ranks, trying to discourage the chase because they've got 2 riders in that leading group of 6. Stuart O'Grady's team is here with O'Grady.
And still Lars Mikkelsen in there as well, who did a lot of work in the early part of the race. Little problem at the back here, and this is one of the riders from Team Cofidis. This is Tristan Valentin. Just this is a big problem as well right now, because the only car behind these groups is the neutral service vehicle, because of the fact that the race is still very much only spread over about 25 seconds.
And as you can see, the road's extremely narrow here, so it's difficult to bring a car forward. If a rider has a problem, you'd probably see his Gent Wevelgem is over, because he'll be left on the roadside for a minute or 2. The gap holding now. These are the psychological seconds where the riders keep looking, thinking they're close enough, and they can't quite get across. Then they all start saying to each other, well, who's going to chase? And the boys suddenly open the gap. And Burghardt suddenly riding very, very well at the front. As Paula said, he's only 23.5 years of age. He got his first big result as a pro in April, earlier this month. Finished 3rd in a race known as the Grand Prix E3. The E3 is one of the cross-European roads here in Europe, and that gives the race its name. But he got 3rd in that, so clearly is a man of pretty good talent.
Well, there are a lot of riders in that group from similar teams. I've seen 3 or 4 riders from Team Gerolsteiner. There's a number of riders from Team Mobile. They can just sit back for the moment and wait. But there are also a number of riders in there from Team Liquigas. I still think once we get to the big main road, they've got a chance, Phil, of getting themselves organised in this group and trying to pull it back together. As of right now, there is no major organisation, because you've got 2 or 3 teams doing the pacemaking. Team CSC with Team Quickstep and Predictor-Lotto are quite happy to have a rider from each squad doing the pacemaking at the front. But I think when we get onto the main road, they'll really try to whip up the pace. But for the moment, they're losing out a number of seconds.
Well, I think this is Martin Lundqvist who's got himself on the front for CSC as the pacemaker. Cancellara looks as though he might still be here as well. And they've also lost a couple of riders in the crashes today. CSC, Lars Mikkelsen's there. This little group is prizing open ever so painfully a gap. It's now up to 16 seconds.
Still not enough. They need to get it up to the 1 minute mark to start to breathe a little bit of relief. And still, that's a fairly large group. We're looking there at around about 25 to 30 riders. A lot of big names did not miss that split at all, because Robbie McEwen's there, Bonin is there, and also I'm pretty sure I caught a glimpse of Baden
Cooke.
Cooke.
Will be there soon. This is another split, look, and they're coming across.
Well, they've, I think, ridden away from the rest of that group, so we could see a general regrouping. Now, if these guys get back to that group and it swells up, that will then give the advantage to that leading group of 6 riders.
As the argument starts to who gives the chase, presumably, but this is certainly closing the gap.
Staff Shearling's there in the red jersey with a white bandage on him. He's the rider who we saw riding very well in the Tour of Flanders at the weekend. And there is basically the remainder of the race, and there's the convoy of cars all wondering whether or not this group is going to make the junction. And those team managers cannot go past until the gap becomes 1 minute between any of these individual groups.
Francisco Ventoso from Saunier Duval making pace on the front now. He was the man that went across originally with Oscar Freire. And let's not forget either, the 3 riders who've been in the break since the 30th kilometre are mixing it here. and so perhaps they're not as tired as we might expect, and that will be particularly useful to the likes of Oscar Freire. Florent Braud, champion of France, is at the back here. He's not assisting now. The Frenchman Christophe Mengin, number 93 there. Is he going to go through? No, they've invited Oscar Freire to drop in, so we've got 2 passengers here. Meanwhile, this is a flashback to what happened on the second descent with Fabio Sacchi there, Matty Heyman, the Australian and Commonwealth Games champion. All these are fallers on the second descent of the Kemmelberg.
Yeah, it was pretty dramatic on the descent there. But now all these riders will put that into the back of their minds as they try to whip up the pace and pull back that leading group of 6 riders. The leading group of 6, although it still doesn't look like a massive distance, it has stretched out again by a further second to 17 seconds. But I wonder how much more they've got in the legs of riders like Roger Hammond and Florent Braud, the Frenchman, and Christophe Mengin, because they've been at the front of this race since the 30th kilometre. But they will see this as a chance of maybe surviving and getting themselves a place in the top 6 if they get down to the finish. I still think that the main field have got enough firepower in it, Phil, to get themselves organised. But the quick question is, which team is going to take the responsibility and which team's sprinter has the best legs?
Absolutely. We're hovering here on this psychological thing. They think they've caught them and they haven't, and there'll be a realisation one way or the other in the next few kilometres. We eventually swing onto the main road as we approach Wevelgem, and then it really will become an uncontrollable free-for-all. But these narrow lanes and the continual change of direction possibly favouring the breakaway just now. Pegged at 16 seconds. Doesn't look far from the helicopter, does it? 20 kilometres to go, or 12 miles left to race to the finish of the 69th Gent Wevelgem. And Roger Hammond of Great Britain is in here with Francisco Ventoso, Marcus Burghardt, Oscar Freire, and the original breakaways of Florent Braud and Christophe Mengin. They're the 6 names.
The other guys in this group who were in that early morning breakaway, they're still assisting in the breakaway. They can see Braud shaking his head there saying, sorry mate, I've got nothing left, I can't do it anymore. Well, we go to the front end of the group. You can see the riders from Team CSC are now starting to take this pretty seriously. They've sent a couple of riders to the front. The second CSC rider there is Fabian Cancellara. I think he'll do a big turn once we get to the big main road to try and pull it all back together, because Stuart O'Grady is in this group, and there is O'Grady just moving to the front. In fact, Team CSC are pretty well represented in this group here this afternoon.
Good, yes, I'm just wondering if Haedo is one of these 4 riders too. Not a rider we've seen in CSC colours very often. He's just joined the team this year, and he got his first big win in the Grand Prix of Cologne. And then he jumped in the car and drove yesterday to the start of this event. It's only about 300 kilometres actually from this part of Belgium to Cologne in Germany.
Really giving us some stick at the front end of the group. I keep looking down the line of CSC riders to see if it is JJ Haedo, but unfortunately we haven't had that much contact with race radio here this afternoon. Bonin is sitting at the back of the group. I wonder what is in his mind, as if he's going to think about trying to get himself the victory here this afternoon. Robbie McEwen sneaking up over there on the left-hand side. McEwen will be thinking, this is a great situation for me because I've got a couple of teammates who can lead me out. And if we can just catch that group at the front there, which is 17 seconds in front with Oscar Freire, this will be a big charge down to the line.
Well, this is a tremendous pursuit, and it's not uncommon to see this sort of a pursuit in Gent Wevelgem, this long, flat run-in to the finishing line. From where we're sat at the finishing line, the wind is not strong, but there is definitely a wind. It's keeping the flags out now, and it's a headwind for the sprint. So it won't be a tired man sprint, and you've got to judge exactly when you break out of the slipstream of the rider ahead of you to go for the line, because the wind could have an effect today. Oscar Freire, the man that's forced this breakaway by sheer strength, sitting at the back just now.
Well, right now, I have to say, Oscar Freire is riding very sensibly, a little bit unlike Fabian Cancellara on Sunday, who was a strong man in that breakaway, and he was dragging a group of 7 riders just sitting on his wheel. Freire keeps dropping to the back, trying to encourage the other riders in the group to find a little bit of strength, to do some work, and that way possibly contributing to the success of this breakaway. But I still feel in the back of my mind, Phil, that this breakaway group is going to get caught once we get up to the big main road, because one of the big teams is going to turn the gas on.
Well, Ventoso in the yellow there, another man just coming up 25 next month, and another young rider. He's had 3 wins in the same race this year. It was Castilla y Leon, a stage race. He won stages 2, 3 and 4, so he's off to a good start to the year and continues to develop very well indeed. And he's done well to get into this break, and he's willing to give it a good shot. It's gone out now to 21 seconds. Well, you could be wrong, you know, when they get onto that main road and there's trouble at the back of the house. You could tell Uscardi's in the spot of bother. I think it's Coldo. It is Coldo Fernandez.
Well, not a good time to...
well, it's all over, isn't it?
Well, when you get a change like this, and this is the neutral service vehicle, and it takes a long time for some of these guys to change the wheels because they don't know exactly what the rear mechanism is like on that bike. They don't know the exact size of the rear lugs on that bike either, so he takes a little bit of a while, and that's not a good sight.
That's not a good... There's the stop car down in the far distance, and that rider's got to bridge that gap now. It's a big arse. You can see from the Belgian flag too, they're in a crosswind just at the moment. Also noted he didn't return the quick release system on his brakes there, so he better do that before he uses his back brake. He might find he's got one.
It's still a good gap. It's a gap that's starting to widen. Yeah, Burghardt has gone off the back. Not surprising. It was a big ask for him to continue to ride in this group, and he did try to continue racing, but unfortunately for him, he's going to find himself very shortly back in the fold. Roger Hammond has still got some power because he's still going to the front. So too as Christophe Mengin. Now it's down to 5, and the gap has stretched up, Phil, to 28 seconds. They may well prove me wrong here this afternoon.
That was where Burghardt cracked. He shook his head, and it's a long way to be out in front, and the pace is probably just 1 kilometre an hour too quick for him. But you've got to keep it as fast as you can pedal now. There's no escape. The whole field is breathing down your necks. They've opened up a gap to 28 seconds, so it's a good sign. It's going the right way as the teams here working hard, including Laszlo Bodrogi in the red, to try and bring it back together again. And the face of, is it Fabian? No, it's not Fabian Cancellara, this rider here, who's on the front for CSC.
Just over on the right-hand side in the dark black jersey of Caisse d'Epargne, that is Vicente Garcia Acosta, who was in the breakaway in the Tour of Flanders. Having a little bit of a sortie up to the Northern Classics this year, a man who we regard much more as a stage race rider, but seems to be enjoying his Tour of Belgium.
He's a very strong rider, and look at, we're out to over half a second now, half a minute rather, 31 seconds. This is looking good just at the moment, because looking at the face of these riders, unless some other riders come and give the quick step boy a hand, they're not going to bring this breakaway back, and Freire will win for sure. Although he might have a little bit of a tussle with Ventoso.
Well, you can see they're starting to drag gaps clear at the front end of the main field. All of the riders in this group are right on the limit of blowing apart, and that's why we're not seeing a great organisation. And Florent Bras has gone straight out of the back, and I'm not surprised. I tip my hat to him. He was in the break. He showed himself off, showed off his national champions jersey, and even found a little bit to contribute to that formerly 6-man breakaway. But now I think he's going to look for the luxury Pullman bus to take him back to the finish in Wevelgem.
Well, we're only 15 kilometres from the finish. The roads are widening out a little bit. This is Ventoso at the back, who's working very hard. Robbie McEwen is in that chase group. He would dearly love to see this group brought back, and then he could use his sprint to victory. He's never finished in a podium position in Gent Wevelgem ever. I don't think he's ever had a top 10 finish. In fact, I'm not sure he's ever finished, to be honest.
Well, I'll have to look back a long way to check up on that. Robbie has been to this race in the past, but certainly he says it's very difficult. He doesn't race in Belgium very often, even though he lives here, because he spends most of his time concentrating on races like the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. Oscar Freire may well have scored the coup here this afternoon, because it's up to 35 seconds as we go back to the main field, and I'm just wondering which is the team. Maybe Robbie McEwen there is going to ask his boys to go to the front and try and organise the pacemaking, because he can feel here, Phil, probably the chance of a victory in a classic slipping away from him.
Yes, and he's right there. It's so frustrating. He keeps looking ahead, and he sees the gap is opening. 36 seconds now. It's like prizing open a clam, but they are getting away, and every second is literally going to count this time around.
Well, it's not very much. There's Peter van Petegem in the dark blue over to the left-hand side. Team Quickstep seem to be a bit short of men here as a Predictor-Lotto rider comes to the front for McEwen. A lot of discussion going on. Cancellara wants to know exactly what needs to be done as well, whether or not Stuart O'Grady is the man for the sprint. I'm just looking down to see if or not JJ Haedo is in this group. It's still a very large group, but that 5-man group, Phil, is now doing a fairly serious job because they've stretched it out. For a long time it was 10 or 11 seconds, and that was really only about 100 meters advantage. Now it's 37 seconds, and that's around about 500 meters.
And Mengin, the rider in white, 93, still riding superbly despite that long breakaway, along with 184 Roger Hammond, the two survivors of the three animators of the race. And they are moving because the gap continues. It's heading up to nearly 3/4 of a minute now, so they're still going quicker than that chase, or in good. And they can't afford to relax, of course. Freire, the sprinter, as well as the man that's driving, can't save any energy for the finish if he wants this breakaway to succeed. And Hammond can sprint finish, but I don't know whether he can after the long breakaway. If he gets to the finish, Paul, he'll have been in the lead for 177 kilometres.
And he's still got a bit of firepower under there. Now it's a different coloured jersey coming up to the front. We've got a change of plans here as Gerolsteiner decide to lend a hand as well.
The teams have got to get organised now, otherwise it's all over. The message must be getting back to them. They are not getting closer. They are losing ground. You see the concern now on the face of the rider there from Quick Step. And I think it's Kevin Van Impe there who shook his head. And
face
now
on Van Petegem too.
He's
now
also up.
Former great captain of many teams in these one-day classics. He now is also going to have to do some work for Tom Bonen. Maybe Bonen has finally said to the boys, okay, the legs aren't bad, go to the front and chase this down. There is Fabian Cancellara of Team CSC. They're all now, Phil, starting to send some big, serious guns up to the front, and it's now that they've really got to put the hammer down, because at 12 kilometres to go and 44 seconds...
It's now 49 seconds.
Well, that really is remarkable, because we've got some big guns riding on the front of this group. Cancellara, winner of Paris-Roubaix last year, Peter Van Petegem, a former winner of the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, and they are acting now as elite domestiques, but it's a long straight road, and even so it is still stretched out even a little bit further to 51 seconds. Though obviously the two strongest men in that group are Ventoso and of course Oscar Freire, but Freire has got to be very clever here. He mustn't be overconfident at all, because if he makes a mistake in a group like this going down towards the finish, he could blow all of his chances.
Well, Marcus Burghardt, who played the perfect team man, so as he wouldn't bring anybody up, especially not Oscar Freire, to Roger Hammond's side, is now riding like a really strong boy. He's driving this breakaway. This man's face never gives anything away. Oscar Freire looks such a casual bike rider, yet here they are pedaling in excess of 55 kilometres an hour. 50 seconds is the gap. Very shortly, Roger Hammond having the ride of his life today. He's finished 6th in this event before, and he's also broken his thumb and went out for a long time in the year. So he's known both sides of the spectrum in Gent Wevelgem, and today he's been a real hero in an awful long breakaway that isn't over yet. He could get his best ever finish here.
He certainly could. It's going to be a very difficult sprint if these guys survive between Ventoso and Oscar Freire, because all those victories that Ventoso got himself in the Castilla-Leon stage race were in the sprint. As we get confirmation of the riders in this group, Freire looked absolutely phenomenal. We do have to say that Freire, I think, was the man that was looking for the move here this afternoon. He was very aggressive, and it was basically his power that forced this move clear. They will now, Phil, start to feel a little bit confident with 10 kilometres to go and 51 seconds.
Another second edged out, but all of a sudden it doesn't seem to be moving quite so quickly away from the peloton. The extra firepower, I think, may have pegged it, but have they got the strength to close it in just 10 kilometres? These are desperate moments now as we race into the closing kilometres. Riders in this big field will be thinking of possible high finishes and not catching the leaders, and this could hurt quite a few riders. CSC still trying to drive down this breakaway, because they've got the man who could finish it off in Cancellara, or indeed Stuart O'Grady, or if he's here, JJ Haedo, and we're still looking for him. I've got a feeling he isn't here.
Well, I'm not sure. It's his first attempt at one of these big cobbled classics in the north of France, and for him it will have been very difficult. Look at the power here of Cancellara. He is strong, ripping them apart, and in fact he slashed 5 seconds off the gap just with that little turn that he did off the front. And it's his teammate coming through on him there, Lars Mikkelsen. They're looking over their shoulders and saying, whoa, we're a bit too strong for these boys.
Yes, his turn of speed there simply took the riders into a zone they'd never been before. They couldn't hold his wheel, and as you say, it pulled back just 5 seconds in one hit. This man has got so much strength in his body. He's a pure speed merchant, time trial champion.
And they say he's going to be the man to watch this weekend on Paris-Roubaix, because once he gets to those cobblestones, he will ride at the same speed over the cobblestones. I just hope that he doesn't get stopped by a train, because I read in the newspapers this week, Phil, that the race of Paris-Roubaix at the weekend is going across 8 railway crossings, and there's a possibility that the race could get stopped on 8 occasions. I hope not.
Well, last year, if those who don't know the story, the riders finishing 2nd, 3rd and 4th were all disqualified because they didn't give way to the train. Although the train wasn't there, the barriers were down. They ducked underneath and continued to race, and they were disqualified. Cancellara, we'll never know whether he did it or not, but the judges said he didn't, and he won the race on his own.
So now we're looking at Mengin. I'm amazed at Mengin. He's a fairly, well, he's a rider who's been around for quite a while, so he's probably got that little bit of inherent strength that even in a situation like this, you can find some strength to survive in a breakaway group. Oscar Freire's face not showing very much at all. You can see the bands on his sleeves there, indicating he's a former world champion. In fact, 3 times champion of the world. The first time he won his championships, he'd only raced on 14 occasions during that year. He's so much as he'd been dogged by injury, and his career seems to be in that at all. It's either winning races or spending time out due to injury.
Well, Roger Hammond in second wheel, coming through now. The only British rider ever to win Gent Wevelgem was Barry Hoban when he beat Eddie Merckx back in 1974. And now Hammond is in this group here. No Spanish riders ever won it. Oscar Freire is in this group. The last Italian to win it was the great Mario Cipollini back in 2002. The last Frenchman was Philippe Gaumont back in 1997, Paul. So that's a long time ago, long since retired. And Andreas Klier was the last German, and he won it in 2003. I think he beat Henk Vogels of Australia that time.
Yeah, Vogel's looking for the win. Second, I think, Vogels on that occasion. That was a photo finish. Henk thought he'd got the win. Oscar Freire now must continue to ride. Look at the gap now, Phil. It is starting to come down, and those riders in that group behind will not give up until the final kilometre. Look at the face on Hammond. I don't think he's thinking about the win here this afternoon. I think he's thinking about just trying to survive and get himself a top 5 finish as recompense for having been in this breakaway since the 30th kilometre. But there's a lot different tone on the front end of the peloton.
Look at this. At 7 kilometres to go, the gap is coming back towards 30 seconds. This is going to be a desperate run into the finish now, and it's all due to the extra strength being supplied by Fabian Cancellara, who's watched and waited so far since we left the Kemmelberg, but now he's decided he's got to give it his best and close it down to give his sprinters a chance. Terrific effort. Big flick of the elbow now. More help required.
He really did carve a mean turn on the front there, Peter van Petegem. Look at those thighs on van Petegem. Probably riding out his last season, but maybe he'll have another go next year. He's getting a bit long in the tooth, Peter, 37 years of age, but he will be one of the riders who can be counted on for a good performance in Paris-Roubaix at the weekend. Look at that long line of riders, Phil. That's an indication that it is starting to hurt here. 6.4 kilometres to go to the finish, 36 seconds. You know what, it may well all come back together in the final kilometre. These men here, these 5 men we're looking at, they dare not now start to play any clever tactical games, because if they do, they'll lose.
A brilliant pursuit as we race down the main road into Wevelgem here at 6 kilometres to go. It's 35 seconds. There's nobody can save anything for the finish now. It is flat out, and may the best man get there. As we watch Burghardt slip back into the rear while his teammate Roger Hammond of Great Britain goes to the front. Then the young Ventoso also will be the next man to go through. There's no passengers, and yet Hammond and Mengin must be so tired. They've been in the lead virtually from the 30th kilometre. At one stage they were 12 minutes ahead of the field. Now they've got some great bike riders around them, and they've survived. 37, another second nudged up as Hammond comes off the front. That was down to Hammond's pacemaking.
Well, he went round that corner and he looked for the motorbike in front of him. That's a professional foul there, but it's the motorbike's responsibility to get out of the way. The route now for the next couple of kilometres will actually swing across to the favour of these guys, Phil, because we're going through town, we're going through the outskirts of Wevelgem. Sorry about the picture breakup, but that's the live pictures being broken up from the motorbike up through the houses, trying to get to the helicopter and down to the finish line. Now it's Burghardt on the front. It's nudged up again. As I said, it's an advantage now for the breakaway to be in town. There's a little bit less wind. They've got the advantage of getting round the corners, and still you could see there Freire trying to encourage everybody to ride in this group. He's got everything to ride for.
I'm just wondering what Ventoso was saying to him there, because I reckon they know that they are the two strong men here, the boy in yellow and the boy in orange. If it comes down to a sprint, I think they'll go shoulder to shoulder. Inside 5 kilometers to go. Now, let me remind you what the mileage is saying on the screen is approximate. It's not necessarily absolutely accurate. It was half a kilometer out in the recent Tour of Flanders, the wrong way as far as the riders were concerned. But at the moment, we're in Mennen, and we know that's just down the canal from Wevelgem. 41 seconds. They have a real chance now, and they know it. But there's a semblance of panic down there.
They're starting to panic a fraction there. You can see Mengin just touching the back of Roger Hammond there, saying, oh, I need a bit of a breather for a while, because we are certainly suffering. Those two riders in 4th and 5th position have been in that breakaway from very early on, and I'm sure they are suffering. The crowd have turned out here to see these riders, and they're wondering who is going to be the winner. And as you said, Phil, it's never been a great race for Spain, although Juan Antonio Fletcher has finished 2nd in this race previously. I think Oscar Freire would like to put that to rights if he can.
He would be the first ever Spanish rider to win it. He said why not when he was asked that question about the Tour de Flanders, but he didn't make it there. He could be putting it to rights today. 43 seconds. I think that was the big effort by the bunch. They may now realise they can't reach them. It's been a real cat and mouse race. They've never been clear, and yet they've never been caught. 4 kilometers to go. Burghardt takes a drink, well earned, and that's the end of that. Less wait, the better.
Well, we're looking now at about 5 minutes of riding to get down to the line. Roger Hammond is digging deep. Ventoso takes over. It is now a matter of urgency to keep setting the pace at the front. Don't even think about slowing down. Don't even think about guarding a little bit of energy, because if you do begin to play tactical games at a stage like this, in a race like Gent Wevelgem, it can change in the space of 1 kilometer. Mengin looks over his shoulder, waiting for somebody else to come through, but Oscar Freire comes through on the inside, followed by Burghardt. It's going to be a desperate chase. They're holding on to 43 seconds. You mentioned about the time, Phil, being an estimate. Well, also the distance being an estimate, the time is also an estimate, and we are only given that as an indication, and that can get closed down very quickly in the final couple of kilometers.
Well, it looks as though they're getting a little bit of thought coming into this breakaway now, and they've got to watch it, because we're back to 40 seconds. Burghardt is coming to the back of the group. He'll want to mark probably Oscar Freire or the boy in yellow. They'll all discount Hammond and Mengin, because they'll believe they can't possibly sprint after having led the race for such a long way. There is 3 kilometers to go. Well, this time it looks as though it's in favour, Paul, of the riders, because we're saying it's 3.2 at that point. So that's good news for the breakaway. It's 40 seconds. Oh, Mengin said, look, I can't do any more. But he's been made to bridge that gap by Ventoso, who wants him there to use every bit of energy he's got left, because Ventoso is a very rapid sprinter.
No prisoners at all being taken in this leading group of 5 riders. Looking over his shoulder, he's starting to feel that little bit nervous. Ventoso is a young rider on the way up, but he will know of the reputation of the man wearing number 161, 3 times champion of the world, Oscar Freire. Inside 3 kilometers now, and it is just half a minute. The main field, Phil, will start to whip it up. They're moving all of the cars out there. Those cars are the neutral service vehicles. Those are the race referees as well, moving forward. It's 28 seconds now at 2.5 kilometers to go.
It's not over. That bunch could come back at 27 seconds in 2.5 kilometers, and the riders will have seen those cars go past, so they know that the break and the bunch will only be half a minute apart, because they know the rules, and that's when the cars are moved away. So there's going to be a real panic here now to keep this group away. And once again, they can't think of winning this race, because there's no time to think of how they're going to use tactics to win the sprint. They've got to keep all of the pressure on. Freire drives through, followed by Mengin. 2 kilometers to the finish, and that in miles is about 1.2 miles, and the peloton is coming. 24 seconds.
24 seconds is really not very much, and on this long straight run into the finish line in Wevelgem, it's going to be very much touch and go. You can just see the main field behind. These guys guys have got to ride urgently. They dare not think about trying to sit on this group as a passenger, because if they do, they will get caught at the end. Mengin continuously trying to force Burghardt to come forward. Maybe this is the moment when Burghardt is trying. This is very strange, because Ventoso now is trying to force everybody to ride. This is bad tactics.
That is silly by Ventoso. He shouldn't do that, because he's forced Mengin to get up, but Burghardt was having none of it, and that called the bluff of Ventoso, who had to sprint the gap closed himself. 21 seconds very soon down the road there. You'll see the red kite, and Burghardt decided it's now or never. Just 1.2 kilometers to go. Burghardt has gone, and only Ventoso. Now Freire must react, as Ventoso has been caught, and he will have to chase him down. And Burghardt has a tremendous turn of speed.
Well, he's got the gap, and that's why Roger Hammond was really battling to try and do all of the work to see whether or not he could make this survive for his man. He's got himself about 4 seconds as they go under the Flamme Rouge, the red kite. Now is the time when both Oscar Freire and Ventoso have got to nail this man back. Otherwise, it's going to be another win for the Germans.
Well, this will be amazing, but Burghardt has made the move when they weren't ready for it, and the man that let it go, I think the inexperience there of Ventoso, and now it has to be Freire to try and put matters to rights. Can the classiest man in the breakaway provide the talent that would do the day in his first? Somehow Hammond's found the legs to go with him.
Well, Hammond's locked there onto the wheel of Oscar Freire. Freire looks under, but he mustn't panic at all. Hammond must be very tired at this point as Oscar Freire looks down now. He's got to ride this race, this individual time trial, if he wants to get to the back wheel of Burghardt, but with every pedal stroke now, Phil, it is actually moving away from him.
Well, Burghardt, I think, has won the Gent Wevelgem with a tremendous finish here. This will be his first ever win as a professional, which started 3 seasons ago, and he's driving it home. The first time a German will have won this race since 2003. They were watching the wrong man as Hammond comes away. It's a 1-2 for T-Mobile, and what a ride by Roger Hammond that is. And Hammond is all smiles here. Burghardt and Hammond get the result which seemed impossible just a little way out, and as they sprint for the line here, the Robbie McEwen shows you just how easy he would have won that race as he bangs the handlebars in disgust. That breakaway survived, and what a great race it was today as Burghardt gets the victory. Markus Burghardt of Germany, one of the new boys in the world of professional cycling. He's never won a race as a pro. He now gets 2 places better than his 3rd place in the Grand Prix E3 a couple of weeks ago. Roger Hammond gets Britain's best ever finish there since Barry Hoban won the race in 1974. And if you ask me, out of a seemingly impossible situation, T-Mobile got 1st and 2nd. There's the result. Oscar Freire had no choice but to take up the pace. I think it was Ventoso who did all the wrong moves towards the end in yellow, as Markus Burghardt got the win, taking the initiative 1.2 kilometers from the line, and a brilliant win indeed. He went with every move today, and he got the result. Now it's celebrations all round. That's a big result for T-Mobile, huge. And having left the side of Team Discovery, Roger Hammond has now tasted a great deal of success on his new team here. And what a breakaway for Roger Hammond, going at the 30th kilometre and surviving to take 2nd on the day. Not surprisingly, he gave an equal 2-arm salute as Markus Burghardt. What a result. There's the result. Markus Burghardt winning on his own there, chased home by teammate Roger Hammond, who outsprinted Oscar Freire. Ventoso taking 4th and Mengin taking 5. All 5 clear of the field, led home by Robbie McEwen, who beat Max van Heeswijk of Holland, Baden, Cooke, another Australian, José Rojas and Alexandre Usov, all sprinters. And there's a look again at the German who's now won his 1st professional race, and I would think there's a lot more to come. He's having an incredible start to the year, especially here in Belgium. Followed up his 3rd place in the Grand Prix E3 with a win in the 69th race at Gent Wevelgem. These are the standings in the Pro Tour now. Oscar Freire at 77 points has taken the lead over Alberto Contador, who slips into 2nd. Andreas Kloden in 3rd, and the winner of the Tour de Flanders, Alessandro Ballan, didn't ride today. He's in 4th. So, only the second German rider to win the Gent Wevelgem race, Marcus Burghardt. The other one was Andreas Kleyer back in 2003. He gets the win today, and he gets the first win of his professional career, joined by his new teammate from Great Britain, Roger Hammond. For him, second place is the best ever finished by a British rider since 1974, when Barry Hoban was the winner there. And the third place rider today, who was the hot favourite to win after the move he made coming up towards the Kemmelberg, and Oscar Freire, who now becomes the new leader of the Pro Tour. Those are the first three in the 69th running at Gent Wevelgem. I hope you've enjoyed what was a terrific race today, and let's hope all of the riders who fell on the Kemmelberg are okay and will be out racing very, very soon. But from Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying until the next time, it's goodbye from Wevelgem in Belgium.